Councillors, can I have your attention, please? I welcome you all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council and now declare the meeting open. Please note that due to current COVID-19 restrictions, this meeting is being held virtually and webcast live over the internet. Welcome. Council looks forward to being able to open these meetings to the public, to a public gallery. This will depend on when the COVID restrictions are lifted, and definitely I look forward to those. To start tonight, we will say the prayer, so I welcome Councillor Moore to help us out there, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Almighty God, we humbly request that you bestow your blessings upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of your glory and to the betterment of the peoples of Cardinia Shire. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Going to apologies, we have no apologies. All councillors are present for this meeting. Before we go to the general business of the meeting, I just want to acknowledge the Australia Day honours. So tonight I would like to acknowledge Mr. Neil Matthews from Beaconsfield, who received a OAM in the Australia Day Honours Awards for his significant service to aerospace, component, repair technologies. So Council congratulates Mr. Matthews on receiving this fine honour. So we note that. Thank you. Moving on to minutes of previous meetings. Can I have a motion, councillors, please, to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting as listed in the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Brown. Thank you, councillors. I put that in. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. Moving on to declarations of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations? I must note myself, I've got a conflict of interest and I need to declare a conflict of interest item to item 6.2.6 due to my employment as a member of Victoria Police. So when that is up for discussion and debate, I'll remove myself from the chair and I will ask for a temporary chairperson. Moving on to ordinary business, the council conducts its meeting according to a consent agenda. Councillors have advised of the matters for consideration this evening that they wish to discuss or debate. The remaining items will be adopted without discussion. So the items withdrawn for tonight's proceedings are as follows. First item is item 6.1.2, which is the amendment to C238 Glismann Road, consider submissions and refer to planning panel. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have withdrawn item 6.1.2, amendment C238 Glismann Road, consider submissions and refer to planning panel. I move the following, that Council adopts the following recommendations. Receive and consider all submissions to planning scheme amendment C238 card and supports changes to planning scheme amendment C238 card outlined in attachment 4 and in accordance with section 23 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, refer all submissions to an independent planning panel to be appointed by the Minister for Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. As the mover, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Moving back to the mover, Councillor Tammy Radford. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council exhibited amendment C238 from 9th of July 2020 to 14th of September 2020 and received 15 submissions. A range of matters raised by submitters cannot be resolved, and it is recommended Council resolve to refer the submissions to an independent planning panel to be appointed by the Minister for Planning. Following receipt of a planning panel report, a further report will be prepared for Council consideration. The land that is affected by the amendment applies to the 21 hectares of land in Beaconsfield, described as large rural living style lots on Glismann Road, including 4 lots fronting Old Princess Highway at the southern end of Glismann Road. The amendment is required as a structure plan action is to rezone land in the Glismann Road area from the rural living zone to a residential zone. And the amendment is also required to achieve the Beaconsfield structure plan action. There was a formal exhibition of notification from 9th of July 2020 to 14th of September 2020, including a notice published in the Victoria Government Gazette, 9th of July 2020. The amendment was also displayed on Cardinia Shire Council and the DELWP website. Notification was sent to owners and occupiers within and adjoining the amendment area, community groups, Beaconsfield Progress Association, Beaconsfield Primary School and the relevant authorities. A letter was also sent to the Minister for Education, as resolved by Council 19th of August 2019, requesting options for expanding Beaconsfield Primary School. 15 submissions were received to this amendment. 12 submissions were received during the exhibition period, with 3 submissions and 1 letter after the closing date. 5 of these were from public authorities, all in support. 1 from Beaconsfield Primary School in support. 4 from landowners, occupiers from outside the amendment area objecting. And 6 were from landowners, occupiers and or consultants on behalf of landowners. Were made on behalf of 8 landowner occupiers. 2 objected to the amendment, while the remaining 4 supported the amendment in principle, but raised objection to the content detail. Thank you. I'll move to the seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Moving on to the seconder, Councillor Springfield. Thank you, Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Radford, for moving this. Look, we all know about Glismann Road. It's long overdue, so I'm very supportive to see this process moving forward. It's been a complicated road, and the goalposts have been changed a little bit along the way by state government and such. And so, yeah, I got to say I'm very supportive to see this moving forward. But note the difficulty in getting to this point and trying to capture the mood and the differing values of all the residents that are there, because it is a bit of a mirage of different portions of land and different interests from the community there. So I'd like to see this process, and hopefully we'll get to the outcome and conclusion in the not too distant future. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this item, either for or against, please? Please indicate. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will support Councillor Radford and Councillor Springfield on this matter tonight. Often planning matters are extremely challenging, and this will allow the most comprehensive analysis of all the issues. And for this reason, I will support them tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Any further speakers? There being none, before I go to the mover to sum up, as the Ward Council, I would like to say a few comments. Thank you, firstly, Councillor Radford, for withdrawing this item. I think it's important to note that we're at a point that we've never been before in relation to this planning process. We've never been to a point where obviously we went to formal submissions, and now we're about to go to firstly a directions hearing and then a panel. A panel is an independent body, okay, third party that will make, obviously decisions, recommendations, which will eventually come back to council and then to the minister for approval. So I welcome us referring these outstanding matters to a panel, third party, and I think that is important for some residents, the independence of a panel. So, the panel will decide on, lot sizes and density, etc. And I know there's been varying views through the submission process regarding this. The independent panel will take into account and make a determination on that. It's really good that we're seeing the signals at Glismann Road, currently being constructed. That was good news that council, along with the federal government, has obviously funded that project, and that's really good that we probably can get to this point, even today, because that was a real stumbling block. Who was going to pay for those signals? So having those signals away from the conversation, away for any developer, requiring to build them first. So I think that is significant. I thank all the submitters for lodging their submissions. I thank, obviously, the Beaconsfield Primary School who put a submission in. I thought that was really important. Over the years, I thought it was very important that council asked the school community, asked the Department of Education regarding whether they have any interest in this Glismann Road. So thank you for, obviously, the school and the department. The department had a different view to the school council, but we note that there was a letter from the department that additional land is not required, but at least we asked the question. And I think that is important. These opportunities won't come around again in relation to future expansion of the school. So the department said no land is required, but the school council is definitely wanting to be involved in the future park that abuts the primary school, abuts this development. So I look forward to getting to that point. So thank you, Councillor Rad, for withdrawing this item. I look forward to the resolution. Hopefully we pass this and pass this on to an independent panel, which I think residents will look forward to. Thanks, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for just explaining a bit more in detail on what the panel process involves. I think that's important for people to understand. I agree there was a wide net put out to receive submissions, and thank you to everyone who has forwarded a submission. Glismann Road has been a long-standing project in the Beaconsfield community, and to see it progress to an independent planning panel is the progression that we need on this matter. After substantial community consultation and feedback, I believe the independent panel will give council and the community the direction needed to progress this planning scheme amendment to the final stages. And with the amendment proposing to provide a diversity of housing stock, upgrades to the road networks and increased open space, it will build on existing character within Beaconsfield. So I move that we approve the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillors, I'll put the motion before us. All those in favour, please indicate, please, by a show of hands. Those against? Any against? I see none. Unanimously passed. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 6.1.3, which is the Pakenham South Employment Precinct Structure Plan. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Springfield. Thank you, Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I move that Council receive and consider all submissions received during the exhibition of Planning Scheme Amendment C265, and 2, in accordance with Section 23 of the Planning and Environmental Act 1987, refer all submissions to an independent planning panel for consideration to be appointed by the Minister for Planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Councillors, can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jack Kowaczyk. Moving to the mover, Councillor Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk. So this is it's great to see this moving forward as well. The Pakenham South Employment Precinct Structure Plan is once this is implemented in the future and developed, it's a really hallmark of what this council is about, which is trying to create jobs in our local area for our local community, and trying to dispense with the idea of having to travel to the other side of the city to work, to get this commute down to your own backyard and to create a viable, sustainable environment within our own neighbourhoods of work, rest and play. The Players Key Amendment C265 was exhibited from 15th of October to the 26th of November last year, and it's seeking to incorporate the Pakenham Self-Employment PSP into the Cardinia planning scheme. This PSP will facilitate 185 hectares of employment land within a state-significant industrial precinct to provide approximately 3,500 job opportunities. The PSP sets the vision for the land enduring the high standard of urban design and amenity with a local convenience centre, access to public transport, local parks and a shared path network. Those who are familiar with the current site will see that it's sort of vacant lots sitting there ready to have something happen. This is going to create the vision rather than being done inconsistently and without planning. This is going to create the vision for what we'd like to see happen on a significant level for this area in the future. I'll leave it there and I'll hand it back to you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeff Springfield. Going to the seconder now, Councillor Jack Kowarczyk. Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Springfield. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to say that I support this. Anytime well designed and considered in infrastructure such as this employment precinct comes to Pakenham or comes to anywhere within our Cardinia Shire, it's a really good thing. And I'm really looking forward to the 3,500 jobs that are estimated to come from this development. Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. Councillors, any further councillors for or against the motion? Thank you. Councillor Davies, to you first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also in support of this high quality planning work. I think it is crucial that in Cardinia we do attract jobs, and we really think about what do we want our city to look like now in 10 years and 20 years. And I think Pakenham and Officer can be an incredible employment hub, not just for Cardinia, but our neighbouring municipalities. And as we grow, and we know we're growing, we need to grow in a way that isn't going to direct everyone onto the Monash into a 2-hour commute, which in 20 years' time, it might take 20 minutes just to get to Hallam. So the environmental and the sustainability considerations in this planning work are outstanding. And I want to voice my support and just real excitement about what this could be and what this could look like for our future residents. So so I will be supporting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Moving on to Councillor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I support this motion, but I would like to stress that I hope that the South and the Hills are not left out of the public transport conversation. It's all very well to have 3,500 jobs centrally, but I think that we owe it to our residents in the Hills and also down south to have a real look at the public transport situation so that people can get to these jobs or at least compete for these jobs. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Moving to Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a nice segue to come off Councillor Brown's remarks. This will trigger, and hopefully will trigger, the Thompson Road extension that go across the bridge at Cardinia Creek there. Because when we have a development like this in the Pakenham South area, of course you look at the roads and you look at how you're going to get people in and out of there, and particularly transport that will come into those industrial areas as well. So therefore that Thompson Road extension is going to be a great arterial into our Shire. And of course, jobs for our local people to keep the jobs of Cardinia people in Cardinia, and without them going out of the area is very important. So I support this motion tonight, and I'm very excited about the developments in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Moving on to Councillor Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it needs to be highlighted that over the last 12 years, we've had 5 to 6 families a day moving into Cardinia Shire, and we project to have 5 to 6 families a day moving in for the next 10 years. This has been an unbelievable battle to try and get more jobs in the local area. As people move out as fast as they do, we know through data that 1 in 5 jobs can be created for those. But with the other 4 out of 5 jobs, they drive out of Cardinia Shire, which just puts a huge amount of load on the roads that we have at the moment. I do concur with Councillor Moore. Hopefully that will encourage the development of Thompson's Road to come right through to Cardinia Road, which will give another avenue for residents to get out. But also too with this PSP, I hope it does encourage developers to develop more jobs in that area. Sometimes we have a mixture of housing in those areas, and that requires a whole lot of extra services that we need to provide. Hopefully we will provide the jobs on a quicker basis. It was tough during the GFC when a lot of places became vacant back towards Dandenong. We had plans in the Pakenham South area for jobs to come, but people took up the opportunities closer to Melbourne. I just hope that during the COVID time, with a lot of businesses really struggling, they can still afford to come to Cardinia Shire to put their businesses. We have a huge workforce here who are just waiting for jobs. So I encourage people when this PSP goes through to do move your business out here, do look to employ our local people. I endorse this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Moving on to Councillor Ryan. Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I support this motion. I think it's a really great motion. It's been a long time coming, and looking at I'm going to keep it short because pretty much all the councillors have covered most of the things that I had written down. But transport is a big issue, and we do need to look out of Pakenham itself and further out just a little bit. I think transport, if we don't have it, then you can't create jobs. And without jobs, we've got unemployment. So I hope that the jobs that will be created will apply to the majority of people that do live within Cardinia Shire. And I think that's a really important item to think about, that we need to create jobs, or companies need to create jobs that apply to people that have the skills here already. So that's all I've got to say, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carol Ryan. There being no other speakers, I will go to Councillor Springfield to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will just reiterate what my previous councillors spoke to. All very good points. You know, we want to advocate strongly for the public transport network to really connect the south and the Northern Hills back into this Pakenham Central, and especially once things like this get off the ground, and things like the central station for Pakenham is developed as well. It's going to be really important to get that happening. So I agree with that. But look, the Pakenham South Employment PSP forms part of the Pakenham/Officer State Significant Industrial Precinct. Urban Development Program DELWP 2016, and is located directly south of the Southeast Business Park, which is currently being developed. Just had the new roads put on the side there recently. And what's important is eventually we're looking to the long-term future to see that southern area south of the freeway there, all along up until Officer, to become these employment precincts, right? That and having these plans in place helps us cement the vision of coherent planning in the future, and deters others, developers fighting for residential development in these areas, because residential development provides a lot more bang for buck per our hectare, so to speak. And so it's an easier way to make money, but it's no good having all the houses that we're developing in this area. As Councillor Ross pointed out, 5 to 6 families a day moving into the region, and we haven't even started Pakenham East yet. So we've got our housing ticked off. We need to make sure we can provide the jobs for the future to really have a sustainable community moving forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Councillors, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour, please indicate, show of hands. Thank you. Any against? There being none, unanimous. Thank you. Carried. Moving on to the next item, which is the table tennis petition response, item 6.2.2. And this item has been withdrawn by Councillor Radford. I believe you have an alternate motion, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have an alternate motion for this. It is that Council note the petition, support the Beaconsfield Table Tennis Group by requesting Council officers provide advice on a range of suitable funding opportunities for the Beaconsfield Community Complex to support the group's current operations. Continue to promote widely the competition grade table tennis program and facility at Cardinia Life. Officers directly engage with the Beaconsfield Table Tennis Group in the master plan process for the future indoor sports stadium at the Gin Gin Bin Reserve located at Brunt Road Officer to ascertain whether they have an interest in being accommodated at this multi-use facility. And finally, request officers write to the lead practitioner thanking them for the request and advising Council's resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillors, can I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk. Thank you. I know there was a number of councillors there, but going to back to Councillor Radford to talk to the alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was brought about, a petition was received with 6 signatures requesting construction of a new table tennis facility at Beaconsfield Community Complex, citing issues with the current equipment and space. So it is important that we connect with more sporting groups, not just our standards, basketball, football, cricket. There is sports of all sizes within our Shire, and it's important that we listen to them and hear what they need. There is currently an existing competition which is running at Cardinia Life with a $5 entry cost. This competition meets the requirements for a local table tennis competition, and the competition at Cardinia Life is played in the stadium. They use approximately 8 tables, and pre-COVID they had averaged about 20 participants. The tables are on wheels and do not damage the court flooring, and that's important to note, that they can go anywhere on a basketball stadium and not damage the flooring. We also wanted council officers to support users to seek funding and upgrading of equipment so that they can better meet their needs. I also believe, as I said before, that more sports can be used throughout these facilities, so it's important that we recognise that our indoor stadium should be multi-use facilities, not just single-use facilities as well. And it'd be good to get their advice, seek their consultation on the future of the Gin Gin Bin Reserve indoor facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Moving on to the seconder, Councillor Jack Kowaczyk. Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Radford. I think Councillor Radford has summed up fantastically well, and I have nothing further to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk. I've got a few councillors wanting to speak, which is fantastic. Councillor Ryan, first of all, thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Councillor Radford. I think this is a really great opportunity for a lot of people within Cardinia Shire. As you pointed out, we're used to having the cricket, the football, basketball, netball, but this is something different. It's a type of sport that will appeal to senior groups, which are already playing. I know that a lot of senior groups play on some of the cruise ships, and it's really interesting to watch them with the swaying of the ship while they're trying to hit the ball. But yes, I do agree that funding we need to look at to encourage the rest of the community to be interested and extend the opportunity for other interested teams to create a bigger organisation of a sport that is fun, and it's skilled in a lot of ways, but it's not a high skill where people can't join in. So I think for people that don't normally play any other sport, I think this is a great opportunity. So I'm in support of this motion. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Moving on to Councillor Graham Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to note that it is a great sport. This is a fantastic sport, table tennis, and I support this all the way. I know I was involved in the original group who started off a competition in Pakenham at the Lily Pond House all those years ago. But it's a really great sport, and what's good about this is that all abilities, all fitnesses can play it. It brings more senior people with the younger people together as a competition. And you've got to look at the expense, how much cost is involved in this. It's not like a football ground or a rec reserve that we have to build. It's quite easy to pack the tables up and put them away in a room and bring them back out again. So it's a great sport, and really I know the one that was in Pakenham all those years ago was a great group of people, and they really got a lot out of it. So keep them all fit, I say. Get them out there and get the young working with the more senior people, and keep them off the streets, I think is a really good idea. So I'm all for this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Moving to Councillor Colin Ross. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I endorse my fellow councillors about table tennis being an amazing sport. I know it's one of the very few sports where people can be they can compete in the Olympics for special needs and in the normal Olympics as the same person. And we've actually had an Australian representative who was actually at the Special Olympics and at the normal Olympics. So it is a really special sport. It's for people who can compete in both, and you don't have to be able-bodied to do both. I just think it's great. I haven't partaked except when it was a boy in table tennis. I wasn't fantastic at it, but I do envy those who are really good. I think they've got an amazing talent, and I think it's something that's fun that people can do of all ages. Anyway, I just endorse this. Thank you for putting this up, Councillor Radford, and I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any further speakers? Before I go to Councillor Radford, I want to thank Councillor Radford for withdrawing this item and also adding to it, adding to the officer's initial recommendations. So thank you. Thank you, councillors, for your comments and in general support for table tennis. Obviously, this petition I tabled late last year, and thank you to the officers for providing a response. But it provides a multi-pronged response and options to the table tennis group in Beaconsfield, whether they want to further invest in infrastructure at Beaconsfield Community Complex, or they want to look at other options such as Cardinia Life, and also a great opportunity at the future Gin Gin Bin Reserve, which will be a multi-use facility. It is very timely that we invite them to partake in that process because we're in the very early stages of the master plan process. So it is very timely that we involve this group. I've gone down to the Beaconsfield Community Complex and partaken in their activities, and they're a fantastic group, and they're very passionate about their sport. And I know there was only a small number of petitioners that signed the petition, but I know there's probably at least 20 or 30 participants down there at Beaconsfield, obviously during better times than last year. So thank you, Councillor Radford. I look forward to engaging with the group to see which way they would like to go, and I would love for them to be involved in the planning process for Gin Gin Bin. Thank you, Councillor Radford. To sum up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it sounds like we're going to have a councillor table tennis team because everybody's so keen on it. A lot of thumbs up there. Fantastic. But as everyone's pointed out, this is an appropriate sport for senior groups, all ability groups, all ages and cultures. And it's very easy to get equipment into a facility that can be easily stored, moved on and off. So I would like this support for this alternative motion as it will identify table tennis as a sport and assist with the promotion of this sport within Cardinia Shire. It'll provide support and advice to the Beaconsfield Table Tennis Group on suitable funding opportunities to support their growing needs. And it will seek community consultation from the Beaconsfield Table Tennis Group on the master plan for the future indoor sports stadium at the Gin Gin Bin Reserve Brunt Road. So if I could please move this alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. I put forward your alternate motion. All those councillors in favour, please indicate. Show of hands. Thank you. Any against? That's declared unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to the item 6.2.6, which is the safer communities across Cardinia Shire. As I said at the start of the meeting, I am declaring a conflict of interest because my full-time employment is with Victoria Police. So it's best practice that I remove myself from this. So I am calling for nominations for temporary chairperson. Traditionally, it is the Deputy Mayor, but can I ask for nominations, please? So, Councillor Ross, you're just a nomination, please. Just on mute, Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross.
Sorry about that. I was going to nominate the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Jeff Springfield, to chair while you're in our absence. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank
you, Councillor Ross. The nomination for Councillor Jeff Springfield. Any further nominations? Can I have a seconder for that nomination, please? Thank you, Councillor Davies. No further nominations, councillors, is there? There being one, I duly declare Councillor Springfield, Deputy Mayor, as the chairperson during this agenda item. So I will now leave the meeting and let Councillor Springfield take the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors. Moving along, item 6.2.6, safer communities across Cardinia Shire, withdrawn by Councillor Kowalczyk. If you'd like to move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I move that the report be noted, and I'll speak to it further once I have a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Kowalczyk. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stephanie Davies. Back to Councillor Kowalczyk to speak to this item.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Springfield. The four recommendations from the report are that Council 1, take a strong stance in denouncing violence and related antisocial behaviours in our community. 2, advocate for increased policing resources for our growing Cardinia community. 3, advocate for the Victoria Police Embedded Youth Program to be available in Cardinia Shire. 4, considers through its budget process appropriate initiatives to strengthen Council's response to community safety. And finally, 5, the report also affirms that every resident of Cardinia Shire has the right to live in a safe community regardless of race, ethnicity, ability or sexuality. This is obviously a bit of a hot topic at the minute, so I encourage members of the community, if this is something that they are passionate about, to read the report. I'd like to thank the officers who wrote the report. I'd also like to briefly touch on the Building a Safer Cardinia roundtable that was held on the 8th of Feb. And there's some notes of that in the report if you'd like to follow that up. It provided an opportunity for community leaders and representatives of Cardinia Shire to share views on matters relating to community safety. And I must say a lot of good ideas did come from that. Some of the key concepts were a focus on youth engagement, the importance of accuracy of information as negative false commentary causes a fear factor around crime, and the implementation of CPTED principles as a key policy in future design that Council undertakes. Basically, from my point of view, there's fundamentally three parts to this. The first part's what the community can do, the community's response. Second part's what Council can do internally. And the third part is what Council can do from an advocacy point of view. So I think council takes its role as an advocate on behalf of the community very seriously and does this quite well in terms of reaching out to higher bodies of government and other community groups. Internally, I'm of the belief that we need to allocate more resources into this space, perhaps even expanding the team. From a community perspective, we need to, and this is the crux of the issue, from a community perspective, we need to promote understanding, the importance of unity and equality, and also education. Get to know your neighbour. The more interaction, the greater respect shared between all parts of our community, it can only increase the likelihood that we feel safe and unified. Now, COVID, obviously, again in another lockdown, has obviously had a detrimental impact on this, but I hope we can come out of this time with a renewed focus on not only safety, but also our community, our local communities and Cardinia Shire as a whole, and the power of spending time with one another. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kowalczyk. I'll now go to the seconder, Councillor Davies, to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Kowalczyk summed it up beautifully. There's some wonderful work being done. So other than that, I just wanted to show my support and my hope that that this evidence-based approach and this approach that can be integrated through the community, through council, through business is really adopted. It's really disheartening, some of the information out there, and some of it delves into racism, and it's really misinformed. And I just think it's very important that we do progress this work, and it's something that I'm personally very keen to continue with over the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. First of all, I'll go to Councillor Radford to speak to this item.
Thank you so much. I've had the opportunity to speak with community groups and residents within our Shire regarding community safety, as it has been a hot topic of late. I've received a number of emails, but one I wanted to share, and with permission from the author, no names will be mentioned, but just to give an example of what people are feeling at the moment throughout the community. This person is a local resident of Pakenham for the past 17 years. Her children go to Berwick College and they catch a bus from Station Street to and from school. Last year in November, her son was approached at 7:45 a.m. at Station Street whilst waiting for the school bus by youths with knives, wanting his phone and AirPods. They tried to pull him off the school bus. This was caught on CCTV, which is going to court on Friday. June last year, he was then riding alone along the Tumut Creek track on a Saturday around 2 p.m. and again was jumped by youths at the underpath bridge wanting his phone and AirPods. He was assaulted in the stomach, but thankfully he managed to get away. This mother is now constantly having arguments with her kids not to go out and to be home by a certain time, dropping them at friends as she doesn't want them to walk or ride, and it's now affecting her relationship with her kids and her mental health. She says, I feel like I'm punishing them because our streets aren't safe. We should feel safe walking down the street with a phone, headphones, or Nike shoes, not expecting to get rolled for our belongings. She's scared that there will be more violence on our streets if nothing is done to curb these pressing issues. So I thank her, she knows who she is, for sending me this email and allowing me to read parts of this. I think it's important. I love that there's a Safer Communities Committee, but I think it's important that it's not all talk and that there is action for our community. So that was just one thing that I wanted to point out, because our community are really wanting to see some action on this issue at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, through you, Deputy Mayor. I think this is really an important issue. It's close to everyone's heart within Cardinia Shire at the moment. It's very difficult when it's in your ward that it's happening as well. I've had quite a lot of response from people within the community of their concerns about their safety, not feeling safe to go to the shops at a certain time. They go early in the morning, which sometimes it interferes with their work, but they feel safer in the morning than they do later in the afternoon. They've been approached at the supermarket wanting money or cigarettes, and if they don't oblige, they're threatened with an instrument. So Pakenham Station, it had been known over a while ago that there were people being approached by groups of people that wanted same thing, phone, cigarettes, money, anything that you had, or if someone had a computer in their computer bag. So it is a concern that our community is not feeling safe, and it's our role to try and work with partnerships to create safeness. And I think youth programs is one issue that we talked about. And I think one of the things that's worked a lot over the last 12 months, or probably longer than that, was having a coffee with a cop. And I think it's good for our community. They feel safe, but they also have the chance to sit down and talk to our police officers and relay that information. It's important that our community reports anything that they feel is something's not quite right. Well, if it doesn't feel quite right, well, then it means that you need to get in touch with the police or report it as soon as possible. I think that I had seen an issue where some people went into a store and came out laughing after they harassed shopkeepers and also shoppers within the shop, and it's a reoccurrence, they said, on a continual basis, on a weekly basis. And so I think our shop owners are concerned as well about safety for themselves as well as their community. So I support this, that we need to get more funding to try and create some programs for safer communities. And you know, we talk about, sometimes I've often heard the wording that someone with a mental illness is a person that will injure someone. Well, I'm here to correct that. Someone with a mental illness is usually wants to hurt themselves. They don't necessarily want to hurt someone else. So I think we need to correct that. And Councillor Kowalski, you're right. We need to educate people on the right information. If the wrong information is given out, then we've got scared community residents. So, so maybe our role is to get that right information out, working alongside partnerships with the Safer Communities Partnership Committee and also the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I'll now go to Councillor Moore to speak.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I want to thank Councillor Kowalczyk for moving this recommendation, and I support this item with you wholeheartedly. I do want to read an article, that part of the paragraph that's in the report, which reads: "A safe community is not just one that is free of crime, violence, and anti-social behaviour. It's one that focuses on creating a safer community at all levels, within all areas. Safety is a fundamental human right. It is essential to the well-being of our community. It is also a key outcome of our council's livability plan." I think it highlights the whole story here. These are just words, I know, they're just words. The community want to see actions. It's on everybody's lips these days. Whenever you see a survey, or you go to a community event or a consultation of any kind, their biggest point will be community safety, and we've got to give them that support. We've got to give them some assurance that we're there to help them support this. Like we have to develop a community safety plan. It's important. Awareness is extremely important. There's a lot of bad news that comes out, particularly across Facebook. we experience this, and it comes back to us to do something about it. That's where recently we've had a group of people together. It's all to do with partnerships and getting partnerships together. From the police can't do it on their own. We have to be together. It's everybody's problem, not just the police, not just us as councillors. It's everybody, all ages. If we all get together to do this, we may succeed in something down the track to have a safer community across our Cardinia Shire. I do recognise that it's mainly in the growth corridor area, which is a shame. The outer areas of our ward, which are in a little bit of false security here sometimes, that it's not going to happen in the outer country areas of our Shire. But wait, it'll come with development, and that's where the problem is. So we have to put a finger on this at the moment. Let's get together. I mean, I know that SEPTED's one of those words that we can use as a throwaway line. I think CCTV is very important. Even the mobile units, if we could get a mobile unit, CEO, that'd be a really good thing if we could get that across the line. A mobile CCTV unit would be something that would be really handy in these circumstances. But it's a whole package. Like I said before, we need to get it all together, I think. And once we put it all together, getting the community working together in these things, moving forward, I think we might succeed. But well done, councillors. I think this is a really great, a great recommendation, and I fully support it. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I'll now go to Councillor Ross to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and I thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk, for withdrawing this item. I must say I've lived in Pakenham for over 23 years and worked in Pakenham for over 29 years, and safer community access across Cardinia Shire could be no more important than it is right now. We heard a briefing earlier tonight that went for nearly an hour from the Vic Police and also our community safety manager on council. And they have a huge amount of work going on in the background to try and remedy this and do the best we can to get on top of it. I must say, from the councillors and myself, it is a #1 priority in trying to support these objectives to try and make Cardinia Shire a safe place, particularly in Pakenham, to live, and also an affordable one. I did ask them to give us a few suggestions about what we can do right now to do it, and council are going to prosecute that and go forward with that. It is just so important that you do feel safe in your community. I thank my fellow councillors for raising this and making it a major important thing for us. Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk, for taking this on board as well, and you see it as so important. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Do I have any other councillors who would like to speak to this item? There being none, I'll just say a quick few words, which is I am very supportive of everything that's been said tonight and helping our community to develop the safest community possible. We had a very constructive community forum last week, engaging with different stakeholders and community members and such on this topic. And what came from that is that this is a whole community approach. The police don't just have the answer for it. Policing and prosecuting crime is not just the answer for this. Council cannot come up with just the answer how to create this and develop this, but we can help facilitate through community, solid community engagement and reinforcement, and bringing our connections together, our community connections and neighbourhoods together to look out for each other and to support those, not just those affected by crimes and such, but support those who may be the unknowing arbitrators of elements that make other community members feel unsafe. We need to really educate, and we need to give guidance to the youth. And as was outlined earlier today, that there is a problem at times with youth and crime, and if we can help engage that through our social connections as well as through the authorities, then I think we can really develop a safer community in the future, and everyone wants to see that. So there's no argument on that front. So I thank all the councillors for their words and their support towards this, and I'll now put this to a vote. Actually, sorry, I'll now go back to Councillor Kowaczyk to summarise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you to all my fellow councillors for your contributions. It's quite clear that this is important to everyone. But it's also really pertinent, I think a few councillors raised this, that we do actually see some action. So I know we're all pulling in the same direction, so the likelihood of that happening is very, very good. But it's important that this remains at the forefront of our minds and we don't sort of let it get dragged down in bureaucracy and action points and nothing really gets done. Just quickly to summarise, Councillor Radford, thank you very much for your input of that harrowing tale. I hope your friend feels safer into the future and that changes that Council, VicPol and the community make have a real impact on her and her children's future safety. It's always terrible to hear stories like that, but that I guess is the human impact of crime and people not feeling safe within our Shire. Councillor Ryan, one of my key takeaways from what you said, and we've heard this a lot, is if you see something, say something. Very, very important. So thank you very much, Councillor Ryan, for touching on that issue. Graham Moore, Councillor Moore, thank you very much for your recognition that safety is a fundamental human right. It is really important, and I don't think a lot of people know that. So thank you for bringing that up and just pushing that idea of unity. Thank you, Councillor Ross. Thank you, Councillor Springfield. So yeah, I think we're all said enough on this, and it's probably dragged out a little bit, but it is really important that members of the community feel empowered by the actions that council are taking, so that they also can take their own actions. You know, get involved, take up a volunteer role, get involved throughout your community, get to know your neighbour, because little things like that can help change the tide over time. Thanks, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Councillor Kowalczyk. I'll now put this to a vote, councillors. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I declare that unanimously carried. Thank you, councillors. And we can now invite the Mayor to come back and join the meeting then. Thank you. While we're waiting, maybe Councillor Moore would like to share a song with us. He looks like he was clapping his hands there like he was ready for it. We could do a cappella rendition of Waltzing Matilda, perhaps, Graham?
Maybe, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but I was actually just clapping to say you did a great job in place of the Mayor tonight, that's all.
No, thank you, Councillor Moore. And Councillor Owen is returned.
Thank you, Councillor Jeff Springfield, filling in the chair. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is notice of motion 1058 Beaconsfield Reservoir. And this item has been withdrawn by Councillor Radford, who has an alternate motion. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have withdrawn 6.2.7 notice of motion 1058 Beaconsfield Reservoir, and I have an alternative motion that council note that the report requested by the Mayor regarding Beaconsfield Reservoir will not be presented to this meeting but delayed until the April council meeting to enable a more detailed report to be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Any further? Sorry, can I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Jeff Springfield, I note you as seconder. Moving on to the mover to speak. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As said at the November council meeting, a notice of motion 1058 was tabled by Councillor Owen and was adopted. And this was that council prepare a report regarding proposed works to be undertaken at the Beaconsfield Reservoir by Melbourne Water. Such report to recommend whether council should adopt a position in regard to the height of the dam wall and other proposed works. It has not been possible to prepare a detailed report to respond to this notice of motion, and so the recommendation is that this report will now be listed for consideration. Originally it was March, but my alternative motion is suggesting April, please. Currently, the Beaconsfield Reservoir is closed to the public, and it is under management by the reserve land is Crown land administered by the DELWP Committee of Management and is by the Cardinia Environmental Coalition. The Beaconsfield Reservoir has attracted community attention the past couple of years with the news that Melbourne Water intended to demolish 6 metres from the top of the 102-year-old historic walls and drain the water to 2 metres depth. So the community would instead like to see the historic Beaconsfield Reservoir opened up for the community as a passive recreational area, maybe utilised for picnics, walking, canoeing in the lake, bird watching, etc. The reservoir has a lot of history surrounding it, and it was built during the First World War using horse-drawn carts and completed in 1918, and it was a vital source of drinkable water. So there's a lot of history behind it, and a lot of people living in this area and new residents to this area should know this history on this Beaconsfield Reservoir. There are many community groups in support for saving the Beaconsfield Reservoir, including the Officer and District Community Association, the Ratepayers and Residents Association, and there's also a dedicated Facebook page called Save the Beaconsfield Reservoir Action Group. Now, the reason why I've asked for this report to be delayed to April is that at the moment, officers have met with Melbourne Water and are organising a site visit for councillors to assist in terms of informing the council report. Thank you. I'll move to the seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Moving on to Councillor Springfield. Thank you.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this item? Thank you, Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this all the way. I think it's a great idea, isn't it, to have the community come into the reservoir, have it opened up as a recreational area. We talked about table tennis before and other things with young people, getting people off the streets and having more activities to do. I think having a free entry to a water area that could have canoeing and all those sort of activities that this reservoir would support. What a wonderful asset we have straight in our backyards that we could utilise with our community down the track. And I think it's a great idea, and I'd really support that aspect of that reservoir being used. Of course, to maintain it and keep it there, of course, as well, would be a great idea as well. So I'm all for it, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank you, Councillor Radford, for bringing this up and withdrawing this item. It's very important to us as a council and a community, and particularly in that Upper Beaconsfield area that where that is. But thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other speakers, councillors? Any other councillors wishing to speak? Before I go back to Councillor Radford, firstly, thank you, Councillor Radford, for withdrawing this. We know there's a lot of community opinion about this issue and very varying opinions. So I look forward to the report coming back. It will be a complex report, and we do need that additional time. But I also note that the community has also asked for additional time because there's future community meetings proposed to be held, I think in March. So it would be timely that council sort of has an understanding of those meetings and what was said and determinations from those meetings. So that will feed into the council report. Long history, as you said, Councillor Radford, a lot of historic sort of history. So I look forward to that being catered in the report. So I'll go back to Councillor Radford to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you everyone for speaking towards this. It's important, as we've said, that we listen to the community and listen to what they're thinking and their thoughts and whether they're viable suggestions as well. Is it something, can we open this up to the public? Let's look into it. So that's why we need to have more time for all of these little details to be looked at and get a proper detailed report in April and for council to adopt a position on this issue. So I'd like to ask that we move this alternative notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. I put forward that alternate motion. All those councillors in favour, please indicate. Show of hands. Thank you. Any against? There being none, unanimous. So thank you, councillors. Carried. Moving on to the next item, which is item 6.3.2, updated community engagement policy. And this item has been withdrawn by Councillor Springfield. Thank you, Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council review and endorse the community engagement policy.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any councillors wishing to second this motion, please? Please indicate. Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk first. Sorry, there was a couple others there, but I'll go to Councillor Kowaczyk. Thank you. I note that. Moving on to the mover, Councillor Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just thought I'd bring this forward tonight, just to speak a few words and highlight the new engagement policy that we've undertaken. This is part of the new Local Government Act from 2020 that all councils must adopt a community engagement policy, and rightfully so, I think, because it has often in the past been a criticism of councils across the sector, not particularly ourselves. I think we've done a great job since my time here, but look, it has been a thing of community not being satisfied with the engagement that is undertaken by councils upon projects, upon anything. So this this provides guidance. The purpose of this overarching document that provides guidance, structure, and accountability to council's community engagement practices. The policy has been prepared in line with requirements outlined in the Victoria Local Government Act and responds to community feedback sought over August and September last year regarding council's engagement policy and engagement processes. So we went out to the community to speak on this. It has been for a number of months now in the works, in the process, and I'm now asking our fellow councillors to adopt this policy tonight as we are legislated to adopt it in the very near future as it stands. So this policy will articulate council's commitment to undertaking best practice, high quality community engagement activities to receive input, feedback and ideas from the community on council projects, services, our plans and our policies, our strategies and other council decisions that may affect the community. I think this is a fantastic element that's been included in the new Local Government Act because this is one of the most important things we can do is properly engage our community. We're not always going to make the decisions that makes everyone in the community happy, but if we can be very coherent in our communication with the community so they understand why we are making decisions, they understand the decision-making process of how we got to a certain point in time or a certain decision, then it can only be positive. So I really welcome us moving forward into the new future of what councils look like with this new engagement policy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I'll move to the seconder, Councillor Jack Kowaczyk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Springfield. This new policy obviously meets the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020, but more importantly, it means that council now has a better framework to communicate with and listen to residents on a more formal level and take their suggestions in more formally, which I think is really important. I would like to see more residents get involved on a general level of engagement. I think some of the surveys that have gone out in the Imagine Cardinia framework have been pretty well received, but I think we can do better. I do often get a lot of complaints that council aren't listening to people, and yet when people have an opportunity to engage, sometimes it's not reciprocated. So I think it's really important. I mean, there's a lot of different levels to that, but it's really important that people get involved within council. It's sort of like the Nutri-Grain ad, what you get out is what you put in. I just want to thank all the residents who are involved in the People's Panel, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of that level of engagement. Thank the officers involved in the policy. And yeah, anytime we can empower people to get involved within their local communities and local government, all power to it. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Springfield.
Thank you, Councillor Kowaczyk, for your comments. Moving on to other speakers, Councillor Tammy Radford first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Springfield, for withdrawing this. I think it's important that, as Councillor Kowalczyk pointed out, sometimes we're looking for more engagement from the community. So I think, you know, a year of COVID has really shown us of different ways of connecting, communicating, engaging. So it's important that as a council, we involve our community consultation and seek alternative ways of getting this engagement from the residents within Cardinia Shire. So I would just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Any other speakers, councillors? There being none, we've got now, sorry. Councillor Graham Moore, thank you.
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I couldn't press the button. It wouldn't come on the hand up. I'm sorry. I just, the words that come to my mind are accountable, accountable, accountable. That's what it comes back to. I think this new policy will align everything. I think it's going to formalise the actual consulting process. You know, over the past, it's been a little bit hit and miss, the consulting with our community. I think this will formalise it, and I think it'll bring it into line, particularly with our new system where we have one councillor per ward. I think it's going to all align with that as well. I think it'll sit pretty well with the community as well, and I just think it's going to make it, like I said, more accountable, and bring the community, as Councillor Kowalczyk said, bring the community in closer to councillors. And I think that's what it's all about. So I want to see more of that. That's all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other speakers? There being none, before I go back to the mover, Councillor Springfield, I just wanted to thank the officers involved in this. I really look forward to this improved engagement with our community. I've been on council, this is my 16th year, and it's way different to back then. We do things much better, and it's proposed that we would even do much better in this space. So I love what was mentioned by Councillor Tammy Radford, is that, you know, COVID has changed the way we communicate with our community in different ways, and I'm loving seeing, as part of this policy, that we're going to, you know, try different forums like live Q&A sessions. You know, it's sometimes difficult for people to go to a town hall type meeting, but if you can log into a live Q&A session, you know, done online, interactive, you know, it provides so much benefits and brings people to the table that would otherwise not be able to do that. Also, I love what we're proposing to do, the additional engagement with our young people. You know, whether it's a playground upgrade, you know, or part of the people's panel. I was at a primary school a couple of weeks ago, where we're involving young people to be part of this decision making. So I welcome all this. So I welcome the additional things that we're going to do as part of this policy. So I will go back to Councillor Jeff Springfield to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well spoken, councillors, and again, this is just improving on what we already have improved on in the past. I think it's probably a work in progress, always moving forward, but adopting and developing a new policy, so how we best address that, how we capture that, and it's a framework to be engaged from every department of council when it now goes towards community engagement for any aspect of the work that we do. We have a framework that everyone can operate to and be consistent with, which I think is really important. And it's we can't, you know, of all the different issues that we face from week to week, you know, we don't have easy solutions and answers for many of these things, but improving upon our engagement with the community and bringing them along for the decision-making purposes and how we get to is one thing that we can improve on, we can work on. So I really welcome this policy and the great work that officers have put into developing it. It's been a great effort. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Councillors, I put this item up for vote. All those councillors in favour, please indicate. Any against? There being none, I duly declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 6.4.2, which is the contract 20-065 Timber Top Early Learning Centre construction. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've withdrawn item 6.4.2, contract 20-065 Timbertop Early Learning Centre construction, and that the council accept the tender submitted by MGCW Proprietary Limited, trading as Lumain, for contract 20-065 Timbertop Early Learning Centre construction, which includes a tender price of $3,972,989.07, excluding GST, plus $48,000 for provisional items, providing an overall contract offer of $4,020,989.07, excluding GST. 2, that we advise all tenderers accordingly, and finally, affix the council seal to the relevant contract documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Ross. Sorry. Thanks, Councillor Ross. Going to the mover, Councillor Radford.
Sorry, I dropped everything then, I apologise. This is a very exciting contract for my ward. We've just recently looked at Ricks Road Integrated Children's Centre, and now there's this one which is looking to open up in 2022. An issue within Officer Ward has been accessibility to the services that will be provided at these facilities, which is a kindergarten, maternal and child health services, and rooms for allied health specialists. Many residents have had to go out of their ward, out of the Shire even, to get to these services. So it's needed for this growing Officer Ward. So I'm very pleased to be able to see this. It also, the facility is important to the community, and it meets our goals within the Cardinia Shire Livability Plan 2017 to 29 to provide an increase in access to services and social support close to home. And that's important that we meet the goals within this Cardinia Shire Livability Plan, which this contract will do. So just a little bit on the company that we would be giving the contract to. There were 5 submissions were received, and the tender evaluation panel, comprising of council officers, undertook a detailed assessment of all tenders lodged, including reference and financial checks in accordance with the tender evaluation process and set criteria. The evaluation panel endorsed the tender submission of MGCW Proprietary Limited, trading as Lumain, as the best value for money tender for council. MGCW Proprietary Limited, trading as Lumain, has undertaken multi-million-dollar builds in aged care facilities, numerous multi-level healthcare buildings, integrated community and health centres, medical centres, private hospitals, churches, and numerous commercial buildings. So I think they know what they're doing. I'd like to move on to our seconder, please.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Moving on to the seconder, Councillor Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Radford, for raising this. This item is much awaited for locals in that area. People have been waiting for this. If you've got a young family and in the past you've had to drive somewhere to take your children, everybody knows loading the kids in the car, unloading the kids, trying to coordinate all of that if you've got older kids and younger kids, it is a really big effort. If you can hop in a pusher and walk down the road to where you've got to go, it is so much better. I just endorse this. I think in Pakenham we've seen great use of these facilities. People are always excited when they're built and they use them accordingly. So anyway, I endorse this and I can't wait to see it built and people start to use it. Thank you, and I'll go back to the Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors wishing to speak to this item, either for or against? There being none, before I go back to Councillor Radford, I'll just say some brief comments. It's fantastic that we're building another kindergarten. This is, I think, 2 in this financial year we will commence. That is great for families. I do acknowledge and note that there's been a bit of a history with the acquisition of this land, and it has been delayed, but it's really great that we've acquired the piece of land for this build, and it's fantastically located next door to the new primary school, Orchard Park Primary School in Officer, which Councillor Radford and I was happy to be invited to the opening a week or so ago. So it is great that it's next door, and it's going to be a real family hub for obviously kindergarten, maternal child health, and obviously the school next door. So I do note that it is under budget, which is a good thing. It was a very competitive process, and it's good to see that there's available funds in the budget for this adoption of the tenderer. So I'll move to Councillor Radford to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ross, for your words of support. Yes, this planning permit application, this contract will deliver on one of the final key pieces of community infrastructure in the Timbertop Estate and Early Childhood Centre, which will complement the primary school that opened earlier this year, only a few weeks ago, really. The centre will have kindergarten rooms, consulting rooms, community rooms, and maternal and child health rooms. I'd like to refer to it as a one-stop shop for families. As Councillor Owen pointed out, it's much easier to be able to have everything integrated together, so I can take my baby to MCH, drop my child off at kindergarten, and then my primary school age children are right there as well. I'm not going everywhere. And with the community growing as fast as it is with young families, it's critical for our community. So, and as I pointed out, it meets our livability plan to be providing services and social support with easy access. So I would like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillors, I put the agenda item up for a vote. All those in favour, please indicate. Show of hands. Thank you. Any against? There being none, declared carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to the next item, which is item 6.4.3, which is the Mayor and Councillor allowances. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Ross. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got to keep sharing different screens so I can read things well. Sorry about that. I'd like to move that Council 1, note that an increase to the level of council allowance available in January 2020 was not accepted at that stage. 2, to propose that the level of the Mayor and Council allowed at Category 3 Council and those allowances proposed to be set at 100,000, 31,000 plus an additional 5%, 9.5% allowances are the equivalent of the superannuation guarantee, and undertake a community consultation exercise seeking submissions on this proposal. This is a proposal. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross, and I do note Councillor Carol Ryan is seconding that motion. Going to, yes, that's correct, Councillor Ryan, just, yep.
That's correct, Mayor, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Moving to Councillor Ross, the mover. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan, for seconding this motion. Look, this item is extremely important as it will be the largest increase, a huge increase in council allowances, the largest in the history of Cardinia Shire Council. And this, when you read through this, if you go through the detail of the report, you'll see that the Mayor will get over a $21,000 a year increase, inclusive of the 9.5%, and councillors will be looked upon as receiving roughly a $6,000 a year increase, which is inclusive of 9.5% super. This is extremely important for the community to be involved. As we heard earlier, when Councillor Kowaczyk said, you know, we need to encourage residents to get involved. Councillor Radford actually shared that as well and said it is just so important that the community process is involved. Councillor Moore said accountable, accountable, accountable. You know, we cannot express that enough. We need to be so accountable. And then Councillor Jeff Springfield said we always need to be moving forward and improving in the area of community engagement and getting communities involved. And this is one of those things. It was really sad last time that when this came up that COVID had just hit and people were bunkered down and struggling with everything, and we didn't have one response to knocking back the increase at that time. I'm gathering with times being tough financially for people, they will find this interesting. I'm interested to hear the views of the community on this, as this is a proposal, and I look forward to hearing from them back. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Moving on to Councillor Ryan as seconder to speak. Thank you.
I reserve my right to speak at the moment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I note that. Any other councillors wishing to speak? First of all, Councillor Davies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bear with me. You know, there's nothing worse than listening to politicians talking about their pay. I've also read the report that Councillor Ross has discussed, and I want to raise that the council officers have actually read that too, and they actually suggested that that supported pay rises do go ahead. Why? It's because it's changing the remuneration at Cardinia Council to be in line with every other metropolitan Victorian council. And this is a state recommendation. It's not coming from the councillors. It's not coming from the councillor staff. It's to keep us all in line with each other. I support our council paying its staff and its councillors for their work. I'm a ratepayer and I want to live and work in the best council, which means that we pay fairly, we get the best people. The council allowances are not huge. It's a part-time job, maybe $24,000 based on my last allowance. So it's pretty much minimum wage once I work out many hours I put on this. And that's okay. I came in here not wanting the money, but it helps me pay my bills. I don't begrudge being paid, and I don't begrudge my rate money going towards council, providing the myriad of services that we provide. With regard to a community consultation, why would we do this? We don't need that. It takes money and time, and why spend thousands of dollars when we could quickly and swiftly engage the rates of pay that are already specified by the state government, without spending money, without, you know, potentially attracting controversy too. I believe the majority of residents will support councillors being paid fairly, but I don't think people are really interested in debating it. Now, another option for councillors such as Councillor Ross, who seem to have concerns, is that any councillor can actually elect to not receive an allowance should they wish. So effective immediately, Councillor Ross perhaps may wish to write an email to the CEO to cease receiving his allowance if he feels so passionately about it. But I do not support this. I don't support talking about it. I support adopting the same recommendations every other council has, and that we move on and we get back to doing our job, which is representing the community, not talking about what we get paid. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. There's a number of other councillors wishing to speak. I'll go to Councillor Moore first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and well said, Councillor Davies. One thing has got to be noted in this report, and the biggest thing to note here, that we've moved up to a Group 3. We've never been this size council before, and that really establishes the need for an increase in rate. It's not a sort of thing. It's just like every other business, if you like. We're no different. Where if a school, for instance, becomes a bigger school and it has more pupils, and the principal is on a different level, it's the same thing. It's no different to those type of things. I note to Councillor Davies, we don't want to talk about money. I mean, my opinion, I never realised that actually councillors got a rate until I got in here as a councillor all those 10 years ago. So it was a bit of a shock to me. But I think generally councillors earn this a lot. I was talking about accountability before. Accountability, they've got to be very accountable to their community. And I think I welcome, and I'm going to welcome some input from the community when we have not consultation, but they're going to have submissions. And I don't think in the past we've had any submissions before when it comes up to these articles. And I welcome the community to have a input into this subject. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Moving on to Councillor Jeff Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, just quickly, I was a little confused when Councillor Ross said last time we didn't have any community engagement when COVID-19 had just hit. I'm not sure exactly what you were referring to, Councillor Ross. If you could perhaps elaborate.
Can I just suggest, Councillor Ross?
Absolutely.
Councillor Ross, can I ask you that you respond to that in your summary, please? We take that as a question, Councillor Springfield, but
pick up on a point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor.
Pick it up on a point of order.
So you're raising a point of order, Councillor Ross. Yep. Can you state it, please?
Yep, absolutely. Just in responding to Councillor Springfield, what I actually said was, if you go back to the tape and rewind it and listen to it, I actually said we had no submission back then. That's what I actually said at the time when we chose not to take a pay increase. I said we had no submissions. Anyway, that just clarifies. Thank you.
I'll go back to Councillor Springfield. Back in 2020, obviously we didn't go through a process. It was just the councillors decided, voted to say that we did not want to go to the next category. So that was a councillor's decision. We've gone into a new council term, and it was the opinion of the time of the then council in 2020, January, that we will this matter will be discussed in the new council. So I will go to Councillor Jeff Springfield to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that was I was confused because we didn't have any community submissions. I was just confused, and there wasn't any opportunity for that. But look, that's not really what I want to speak on. I just wanted to speak on the fact that look, I look forward to future generations of us never having to do this again. As Councillor Davies spoke about, we don't want to be sitting here talking about our pay. And part of the Local Government Act 2020 was that councils wouldn't have to decide on this again. So unfortunately, it hasn't been enacted yet. That part of the Local Government Act 2020, which would then hold the responsibility over to the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal, which would undertake the assessment of this, and we would be left out of the picture, because it does seem a strange topic to sit around and talk about. So I look forward to that coming in the future, Mr. Mayor, and again, like us not having to bring this forward in future council meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any further speakers? I'll say some comments and then I'll go back to Councillor Ryan, who's reserved her right to speak as seconder. I just want to state that obviously we're going through a submission process, and I encourage all residents, if they've got a view on this, to make a submission. Back in 2016, when we did go out to submissions, there was zero submissions when council was a Category 2. As stated by previous councillors, we moved to a higher category, Category 3, in January 2020. As I said before, councillors of the time said we wanted to leave that decision up to the new council, and obviously that was even pre-COVID-19. So I welcome people's comments and submissions. Please note these allowances are before tax. Most councillors, pay tax on that, so please note that. Allowances, in my opinion, are important. We don't want, in my opinion, only those people in a financial position to nominate to the role of councillor. Some people may rely on such an allowance to assist them as they may forego other employment. So you don't want to be a situation where people don't want to nominate to be on positions of a councillor on a council because they may not be in the financial space to do that. So I think we've got to be careful if we go down this path. For future nominations, future councillors, you may restrict them from nominating. But I do welcome submissions, and I look forward to those submissions coming before council to consider. I will go to Councillor Ryan to speak as seconder before I go back to the mover. Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, thank you for your proposal, Councillor Ross. And I value what everybody has to say. I think the community realises that we all have a right, whether we're residents within the community or we're councillors. And as councillors, they do like to hear what we've got to say. And I think that this is a subject, because it was delayed until this year, of the allowance pay rise. I suppose that's what's brought the conversation up. We have gone from a Category 2 to a Category 3 because of the numbers within our community growing. And to me, I think it's great. It just indicates that we have a community that people want to come to our area. They want to work here. They want to live here. And so that indicates from going from a Category 2 to a Category 3. It's interesting, some of the comments that were made. Some of them I agree with, some of them I've got my different opinion on it. I suppose one of the things that I look at is that, can we justify a pay rise within COVID still and being in lockdown again? And we don't know what's going to happen with lockdown. So it does restrict us in what we're doing as councillors, because most of our work now is on Zoom again. So that's one question as to, will the residents look at that? Will they put in a submission about that? Is the fact that because we are in lockdown, they may see things differently. Everybody talks about pay and allowances, no matter who we are, no matter what job we do. So, and we work hard for what we do within council. It's quite challenging. And I think the more residents realise that we aren't in it for the money, we're here to do a job. And this covers some of our allowances as travelling. We do travel quite a distance, some of us, to different meetings within the city and back again. We travel within some of the events that we have on within our community. I think as far as councillors go, our responsibilities have changed now. We've got a lot more responsibilities in becoming from a multi-numbered ward to a single councillor ward, which means that we've got more work to do, but also we've got to find the time to do it in. So every position within council as councillors is part-time. It's not full-time, so that's why we all have a job outside of council to keep us all above board and paying all our bills like everybody else. So I suppose one of the things that stands out to me is that accountability is one, and this is one way of showing accountability and transparency. And this is what the community keeps asking: transparency, transparency. And I would hate to think that the community, if we don't discuss it and the community then hears about it, then that's when their concerns come, and then we have to deal with it again. So I think it's best if we just have this open discussion, which is valued with all of our opinions, and respectfully everybody has an opinion. And I think the community needs to see that we are diplomatic in our conversations, and this is a discussion that we're very open about. So I'll leave it at that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I'll go to Councillor Ross to sum up the recommendation and the motion. Thank you. The motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must say thank you, my fellow councillors, for sharing your point of view on this. I just want to note that the third dot point of the recommendation is to undertake a community consultation exercise seeking submissions on this proposal. I must just correct a couple of things. Councillor Davies said this would bring us in line with all other councils. All other councils in metropolitan Melbourne go on the category that they go on. They all don't get paid the same money. It depends on your council what you get paid. Also too, it was spoken about that I don't take, basically, you know, if I don't value allowances, I should just give the whole lot back, right to him and say I can live on nothing. I must say I agree with Councillor Brett Owen on this. Council allowances are extremely important because if you work really hard for the money you earn, you know every dollar counts, and every dollar you count it decides the decision in your family, what you do, the decisions you make, the school, where the kids get, you know, extra things, what they eat in their food, the house you live in. It determines so many things, and no one has to lecture me on how hard it is to work. I mow lawns for a living, and I've done it for over 11 years, and I mow every day just about between 6 to 16 lawns every day, and I do it in the middle of winter, and I do it when it's 40-degree heat.
Point of order, please.
So for someone to lecture me.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll just ask you to pause there. There's a point of order, and also, yep. Councillor Ross, you know, the normal practice is that when you're summing up, you have 2 minutes. So keep that in mind when you're summing up. Councillor Davies, you've got a point of order.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's irrelevant for Councillor Ross to bring, you know, his employment into it and the value of $1. I work too, as I think the majority of our community does, and I don't think that's relevant to the debate about whether or not we put this to a community consultation or not. Thank you, Mayor Owen.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. I tend to agree. Councillor Ross, can you obviously keep in mind that the limited time frame you've got to sum up? Please sum up to the item, please. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would just ask for procedural fairness. If we go through and we look at how much time people are being given to sum up tonight, it is minutes and minutes and minutes. And this is the very first time it has been highlighted.
Councillor Ross, I'm just mentioning.
Is that correct or not?
I ruled on the point of order, please. I've been keeping time throughout speakers, and you're the only one that's sort of getting close to the time frame. So just keep that in mind. I gave you a warning. So can you please sum up? Thank you.
All I would say is this is extremely important money during really tough times, and no one has to tell me how hard it is to earn $1 for a 21,000 over 21,000.
Please, point of order, please, Miss Councillor Owen. The value of $1 and earning $1 isn't relevant. This is a debate about a community consultation. Please, may I make that point of order?
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Can you just sum up, Councillor Ross? I think you're going away from summing up. Can you sum up? You've got 30 seconds to go. Thank you.
I have raised this because this was raised by Councillor Davies by saying to me that I should hand my money back if I've got that much money. Anyway, I will finish. If councillors don't want this to go to the community, as been pointed out by some, that's their choice. Point number 3 dictates it will. So I would encourage people to support it and take it to the community to see what their thoughts are on the largest pay increase in the history of Cardinia Shire Council.
Point of order, please, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Owen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Your time has expired. I will now put the motion, the agenda item to a vote. All those councillors in favour of the recommendation as moved, please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you. Thank you. Any against? Thank you. That's carried. Moving on to the next item, which is item 6.5.3, Performance and Growth Reports, Q2, Quarter 2, 2020 to 2021. This item has been withdrawn by Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I have withdrawn this item, 6.5.3 Performance and Growth Reports, Quarter 2, 2020-21. And I move that the Council note the report. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Can I have a councillor seconding that, please? Thank you, Councillor Davies. Thank you. Going to the mover. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you so much, Mr Mayor. The Performance and Growth Report is very important, and so I would like to highlight just a few things out of the report for the community. The community report Cardinia report their performance and growth on a periodical basis to help inform decision making as well as identify business improvements across the organisation. The reports provide detailed progress on actions undertaken to deliver the council plan, highlight the performance of a number of key service areas, and present relevant growth statistics for the Shire. Some of the highlights are council plan progress. Over 80% of council plan actions are on track to be delivered by their due dates, and 9% have already been completed. This is a positive result. The progress of the council plan is reported quarterly to monitor performance and to inform the community of the work that council is currently undertaking. Reduction in unsealed road complaints. There has been a 66% decrease in the number of unsealed road services requests compared to the same time last year. That is 575 service requests compared to 1,690 the year before. This significant decrease is due to changes in the unsealed road maintenance program, enabling roads to be proactively graded before a complaint is lodged. A great example of management and staff identifying an area for improvement and successfully implementing a strategy for change. Waste performance. The performance of Council's waste service continues to remain of a high standard, reaching service level targets for both quarters of this financial year. Waste is the leading request category for which our residents require assistance from Council. Therefore, it is vital that the level of service for this key area is maintained. Household waste recovery. Our residents have boosted their recycling efforts this quarter. The percentage of waste diverted from landfill is 48.5%. That is 2.1% higher in comparison to similar council results as published on the Know Your Council website. This is fantastic. One that I've touched on earlier today is maternal and child health participation. These provide services to parents, offering information and advice on issues related to child health and development and parenting. The percentage of infant enrolment to service is at 100%, and the 4-week key ages and stages participation rates remains high at 99%. This also demonstrates the necessity for this service as it's being well utilised. And just a little note, there's an average of 4 new households moving into the Shire each day, many of those being young families. This quarter, the number of babies born in the Shire is 3% higher than the same time last year. I wonder if that's COVID related. Residential land development. In January, the structure plan for the Pakenham East Precinct was approved and the development for this new precinct will begin shortly. There are over 20,000 lots still to be developed across the Shire, the majority of which being within the Officer and the Pakenham East precincts. With so much current and future land activity occurring, Cardinia Shire will continue to be a growing community for some years yet. The real value of reporting performance periodically is to identify the indicators that need improvement and develop strategies to bring about positive change. The current report reveals that there are improvement opportunities in the unsealed roads, drainage and contact centre areas, and there are plans already in place to work on improving service levels in these areas. A good example of this is the work being done to improve the integration of our inspection and maintenance management system with the customer relationship management system. Thank you. I'll move to the seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Thank you, Councillor Stephanie Davies, to speak as seconder.
I'll reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Note that. Any other councillors wanting to speak for or against this motion? Councillor Brown, I note. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Radford, for withdrawing this item, because it's an extremely important item and report. And I think it's extraordinary, the figures that have come out of this report, considering the working environment that our officers have had to work under over this this COVID crisis. Nearly every indicator is on the improve, which sort of indicates to me where do they go from here, because as things get better, we're going to be looking for an improvement, I guess. But I would just like to say well done to the officers, and in particular during these difficult times that they've hung in there, they've been able to meet their targets, and more power to them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Before I go to Councillor Moore, Councillor Ross, can you put a light on? We can hardly see you, if that's possible. That's better. Well done, Councillor Ross. We can see you. Councillor Graham Moore, go to you. Thank you.
I was just working on the issue, Mr. Mayor. I just didn't want the interior light in the car to get too hot and melt the plastic.
Okay.
Anyway, I've turned it on now, so hopefully everyone can see me.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Moore to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the one that's usually in the dark, Mr. Mayor, but I've seen the light today, that's for sure. I just want to highlight something that came out of the report, Councillor Radford. What was very important is the unsealed road program. I've got to say congratulations to our team, our road engineering teams these days. I'm sure particularly Councillor Brown and I appreciate, I don't want to speak for Councillor Brown, but I know that in our unsealed road arena over the past many years, it's been one of the biggest problems within our customer service, and I just think it's fantastic to hear those results of this report of the how many people are not complaining about stuff because we're being proactive to get these projects fixed, and there's no really big complaints. There might be now because I'm highlighting it now tonight. The residents out there might say, well, we will complain now, but I think the road engineering group have done a fantastic job in place, and I want to say to you, CEO, could you pass on particularly my thanks to the road engineers for what they're doing out there in that unsealed program, because it is a big thing within our Shire. That's all I want to say, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Moving on to Councillor Jack Kowarczyk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Radford and my fellow councillors for your comments. I will be brief. I just wanted to thank the Infrastructure and Environment team at Council, headed up by Peter Benezic, which have a lot of positive indicators in this report. They've also responded to a number of items within Pakenham Hills Ward relating to Eastone Reserve Pump at the lake, clean-up. They've quickly responded to a lot of dumped rubbish, which is a continual problem within Pakenham Hills. So I want to thank them for that. And also footpath repairs and infrastructure repairs that they get onto straight away. So I encourage anyone, if you do see anything throughout our beautiful Shire, contact your relevant ward councillor or contact Council Direct. And the only other thing that I saw in this report that really piqued my interest was the quality of the upwards of 2,000 kilometres of drains that we have throughout our Shire was on the up. So that was good to see. And yeah, it's a great report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. Any further speakers before I go to Councillor Davies for her right of responding? A seconder. I will go to Councillor Davies. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to echo the positive sentiments by my fellow councillors and thank Councillor Radford for withdrawing this motion. The annual report, or the reporting is incredibly valuable information, and there's a lot of good news there. So I would like to thank the council officers, in particular Dr. Carol Jeffs, the CEO, and I will and I look forward to more improvement in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies, as seconder. Moving to the mover to sum up. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for your comments. This report is important, and I thank the council officers for compiling this report for us. We've always got room for improvement, and the performance and growth report is so important to us as an organisation. It shows us how we can grow and it shows us how we can grow and improve, and I move that we support the officer's recommendation to note this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillors, I put the item to a vote. All those in favour, please indicate show of hands. Thank you. Any against? There being none, carried unanimously. So, councillors, moving on to notice of motions. Can I just remind councillors, I'm pretty tolerant of allowing councillors, obviously, the opportunity to debate, but as per our meeting procedures, just please keep in mind the 5-minute time frame for a mover, 3 minutes for any other speaker, and then 2 minutes for the mover to sum up. Just keep that in mind. Obviously, I think a lot of councillors will speak to these items, so just keep that in mind. I don't want to gag debate, though, so just keep that in mind. Moving on to the notices of motion, we've got 4 from Councillor Ross. Notice of motion 1060. I will ask Councillor Ross to move so. Councillor Ross, you're on mute. Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I hope this isn't off me 5 minutes.
Thanks, Kit. No, it's not. Councillor Ross, go ahead. Thank you.
Anyway, I won't say this to all of my notices of motion, but what I will say, I'll move this for starters. I move notice of motion 1060 that council amends the councillor expenses policy and audit committee charter to require the internal audit of all councillors, deputy mayor and mayor's expenses. This will include travel expenses, driving routes, parking expenses and any other expenses. That will be then signed off by a council officer responsible for the payment and reported to the audit committee. This will commence from the beginning of the council term back in 2020. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I note that Councillor Ryan wishes to second. Is that correct, Councillor Ryan?
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. Going to Councillor Ross to speak to notice of motion 1060. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In speaking to this, I'm not going to say this over the 3 notices of motion that I've put up, but I will say, in my opinion, council needs to have a genuine, unwavering, non-negotiable conviction for transparency and accountability about how it uses ratepayers' money. In uncertain times like these, where people are struggling financially, we need to all feel urgent sense of responsibility to respect and protect ratepayers' money. I urge and encourage all my fellow councillors to support this motion unanimously going forward in order to protect the integrity of this council and the community, to be transparent on how it uses ratepayers' money in the future. This is the right thing to do by council and the right thing to do the community. This is just plain common sense. Because of this, if we have nothing to hide, we'll hide nothing. I just know that, and I know that in the past we've had council policies in this area which haven't given the confidence to the staff or the councillors that when they're signed off and they're handed in that it can't come back one day. We need more rigour around this space. We need to do it up front, and that way we can be certain for ourselves, for the staff and the community that it's all been done and double checked and triple checked. Anyway, I hand this over to my fellow councillors and I look forward to their response. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Moving on to the seconder, Councillor Carol Ryan. Thank you.
I reserve my right to speak at the moment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. We note that. Any other councillors wishing to speak either for or against? We've got Councillor Ray Brown first. Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I was surprised to hear that our claim for expenses were not checked in respect of their authenticity and their accuracy when they were put in, that they were just submitted. I was very surprised at that. Therefore, I will be supporting this motion because I believe it's just good governance for somebody to have a look at expenses that are lodged and make sure that they're bona fide. I can't see any demon in the motion at all. It's a straight out motion just asking that we be transparent, that we're up front, that they're looked at, they're given a tick, and when they're given a tick, they'll be followed through. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. There's a number of other speakers. I'll go to Councillor Davies first of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Claims are already checked. Claims are already questioned if necessary, and it is my advice that they always have been. I expect accuracy, accountability and appropriate conduct by all government officials, and I have no concerns about being audited, none. And I do have significant concerns about this motion, and I want to express my disappointment. I feel Councillor Ross is trying to take negative attention towards himself, off himself at the expense of the council. Council employs highly qualified and experienced professionals in its office. High quality governance practice is demonstrated as the standard. My professional background is in state and local government, and I can vouch that the work done at Cardinia by the staff is very, very good. The council officers already review each and every council expense claim, as they have for years. And it has been confirmed to me on numerous occasions that they will raise it with us if there is any potential for error. So they already help us do the right thing. And we already use ratepayer money appropriately. So with the obvious exception of business that's been dealt with at previous council meetings, that's now with the local government inspectorate that refers to Councillor Ross, there is absolutely no evidence of any wrongdoing by any current councillor, any other current councillor, so I should say. And so for this reason, I feel that this audit is an unnecessary burden and expense to put on staff and cost to the community. We don't need it. And the cost of this, which I expect would be probably up to $500,000 in auditing fees, could be smarter spent in numerous other ways. My recommendation is that Councillor Ross investigates the current policies and procedures that are in place regarding expense claims. And should he have specific recommendations or tweaks, I would absolutely welcome the discussion of this. But this motion, it's completely unnecessary, both policy-wise and in practice. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. I will go to Councillor Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I also can't support this notice of motion for a couple of reasons. But firstly, I'll point out I only received this notice of motion 1 minute before our council meeting, and I'm appalled at that. I would have liked to have seen this thing deferred, seeing as we had so much robust discussion prior to that to point out how it wasn't going to be implemented previously. We had a number of opportunities in the last week to perhaps amend that and discuss that, but I've only been given this amendment for this notice of motion 1 minute before our council meeting started. And so with that in mind, I haven't not had any time to, or none of us councillors have had any time to discuss with council officers what the implementation of this would look like in practice to actually implement. This is not speaking against transparency. I think it's fantastic that Councillor Ross is advocating for transparency from councillors and councillors' expenses, and that's great. So it brings me to my second point why I don't think this notice of motion is necessary. We're better off capturing this within our review of the councillor expenses policy. Now, our very last council meeting we had, we raised a notice of motion within that council meeting that was a council policy was adopted to review our councillor expenses policy. That is the best framework to capture how we want to move forward with the best policy. We can sit there and we can debate each portion of the ideas that brings forward, and every councillor can bring his ideas forward. And I welcome Councillor Ross in that point of time, when we get to that point in the near future, to bring all these ideas forward, and we can capture that within this when we develop a new policy. But to give me a notice of motion 1 minute before the council meeting to say this is going to be added to the policy to commit, I can't support that. It's not being against transparency. I just don't believe this notice of motion will capture transparency for the future within, of what Councillor Ross wants to achieve. Unfortunately, I understand what his motives are. I think they're good motives, but unfortunately, his experience, he's not going to capture what he wants to achieve within this notice of motion, in my opinion. So I won't be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Councillor Ray Brown, you have spoken, I believe. Councillor Jack Kowarczyk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this is appropriate, I'd need to just ask a question to you or the CEO. I just don't know if there's any scope in the Local Government Act 2020 for the legality of this motion around authorising. So, firstly, let me say I have no problem with this on face value with this motion. But just around authorising a council officer to be responsible for payment, approving and signing off on it, I don't know if there's scope for that in the Act. So I need to know whether or not it's legal before I vote on it.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. I might refer to the CEO. In your response, can you respond to Councillor Kowarczyk? And also, obviously, we've got a current policy, which we note that will be reviewed very shortly. So if that recommendation, if the notice of motion of Councillor Ross gets up, how does that conflict with the current policy? Is there any concerns there? Can you assist us there, the CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. So, Councillor Kowarczyk, it is unusual to be asking a council officer to be so carefully auditing councillors' expenses, and it is a challenging position to place officers in, given the differential. I'd have to take on notice to obtain some advice as to the legality of it, as you've specifically requested, and I anticipate that could be done as in the review of the councillor expenses. So should this be successful, we will be testing that as it's folded into the councillor expenses policy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Kowarczyk to further speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Carol, our CEO. Thank you for that answer. So, in light of that, if we're waiting to hear back on whether or not it's even legal for this notice of motion to go through, I would be sort of a mind to not support it tonight. To await some further clarity around the policy, the report that's coming back on the policy that'll be coming back very, very, very shortly. I believe our council officers, relevant officers, know it's a thing of top priority for Councillor Ross, so they're working very hard on it. I don't claim travel to council headquarters, and I think the people in the community know who's rock solid when it comes to this stuff. So I'd welcome an internal audit of all councillors. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. However, we just need to make sure that we're going about this the right way. And so I won't be supporting this tonight, but Councillor Ross, if we get feedback back that we can do this, I'll be happy to support that in the future. And also any changes in the future policy that will reflect this, I'd support that in the future, but not tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. Going to Councillor Graham Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I find this hard to believe that I'm putting up for scrutiny here to over the past 10 years of being a councillor, doing the right thing, and I think the councillors that I know have always done the right thing in our community, in our community's eyes. To be I know the big word tonight for me is accountable, being accountable, and it is a big word, but it's the same thing. I think that we are checked. We have got checks and balances in place. But the term of the mayoral car has always been one of my beefs. I think the mayoral car should be mandatory from the mayor to take, and I think the mayor's busy enough. The job's busy enough, let alone doing a logbook and every event, every possible thing the mayor goes to being logged. I can't see it. I will not support this tonight. I can tell you that now, because I don't. I believe we've got everything in place, and I'll be checked. You can check my records as much as you like, and I'll be scrutinised, whatever you want to do. Because I think us as councillors, we're put in a position of trust, and that's what we're there to do. Not to be checked, not to be. Is there a real need for this? I just can't believe I'm hearing this. I can't believe this notice of motion has come up. Notice of motions were a thing used in Casey, not in Cardinia, to get a point across that someone couldn't get a point across, and I will not be supporting this tonight. I feel really bad handled actually on this whole arrangement, but that's my opinion, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry to get a bit emotional about this, but I think we do the right thing. On the scheme of things, we're not talking about a huge amount of funding here. You're not talking about a lot of dollars here, and it's expenses that we incur in the job we're doing to represent our community. It's simple as that. It's not any more than that. And to be scrutinied again further, I think is just a bit of a smack in the face to me, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, but that's just the way I feel, because I just feel very emotional about this. But anyway, I won't be supporting this tonight, councillors and Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this first notice of motion, 1060? Before I go to Councillor Ryan, as seconder, to say a few words, I just wanted to ask a question firstly to the CEO, Ms. Jeffs. Obviously, this councillor expense policy is a priority of all councillors. Can you please give councillors a time frame of when this will go before councillors at briefing, and then obviously the expected sort of adoption and process of this updated policy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd anticipate to have a draft before councillors at a briefing within the next month, and then following that for council adoption.
Thank you to the CEO. It is a priority of all councillors around the table, and I welcome that. And that also goes back to, as the previous comments by Councillor Springfield, that this is a outstanding resolution of council that we review the policy. And Councillor Ross, you've got a lot of good intention there, and I will seriously consider all those when we do review the policy. But I've got concerns that we're making policy on the run, it appears to me. And yes, we were workshopping your motion late this afternoon, and as Councillor Springfield, we were thinking on the run, in some, when we're brainstorming this. So I do think it's wise that we obviously bring those matters when we do review the policy, and I welcome that review. It is very timely, and I welcome that. So I will go to Councillor Ryan to speak as the seconder. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ross, for your notice of motion. Thank you to all the councillors for your input. Again, we've all got our own opinion, and respectively, we've all got, we can all see it in different ways of what our perception is of how we read it, how it comes to us to mind. The things that come to mind here, there are some good things here. I think the intent is that it's showing again the community that we are trying to be as transparent as possible and accountable for what we do within our work environment. And the expenses do cover our travelling, but there have been times, and this has happened before the new councillors came on board, that there was, if you did put down what your expenses were and you got them ticked off and they weren't right and they weren't questioned, then you're the one that's responsible for the big mistake. And I think everyone needs to know that you need to be very careful how you put down your expenses, because at the experience of the person that does look at it, I value their input, and I think it's really important that we respect what they do. I think as far as a current policy and an update coming up, I value that point. I think it's a subject that we have to follow through with. We've started this this conversation again, like many tonight, and so I think that I don't have a problem with it, because I think it's about accountability and transparency. But I'll also look forward to, if we're going to add to a new policy, then I would support that too. But tonight I will be supporting Councillor Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I will go to Councillor Ross to sum up, please. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank my fellow councillors in enlightening me on their positions this evening. I must say, Councillor Moore, I think you foreshadowed the next motion by talking about the councillor mayoral car. This one's actually just about councillor expenses, not the mayoral car. Anyway, thank you for foreshadowing that. Look, I'm just going to sum up by saying a couple of simple things about this. I've got a host of meetings, and even tonight, councillors have shared they are absolutely happy to be totally audited in any which way to be transparent. So therefore, I see nothing wrong in trying to put a more rigour around our transparency. I hope people will support that. I fear, after hearing some people talk, they're more interested in selective transparency than total transparency, because this is just about total transparency. Anyway, I thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I look forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I put the notice of motion 1060 to a vote. All those councillors supporting that, please indicate by a show of hands. Okay, those against, please indicate. Okay, that is lost.
I call for a division, Mr. Mayor, but I don't know how I stand up in the car.
No, we're going to raise our hands. So that notice of motion is lost. So all those in favour, please indicate a show of hands now, please. So I note all those in favour is Councillor Colin Ross, Councillor Carol Ryan and Councillor Ray Brown. All those against this notice of motion, please indicate by a show of hands. So I call upon Councillor Jeff Springfield, Councillor Stephanie Davies, Councillor Tammy Radford, Councillor Jack Kowaczyk and Councillor Graham Moore and Councillor Brett Owen. Thank you. That notice of motion is lost. Moving on to the next notice of motion, also in Councillor Ross's name. That is notice of motion 1061. Thank you. Councillor Ross to move his motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move notice of motion 1061. The council amends the councillor expenses policy to require the development of a quarterly internally audited report of the mayor's expenses. This will include the expense of the mayoral car if taken by the mayor instead of drive your own car and only claim trip by trip. This will be a quarterly report that will be included in the General Council meeting as a report. This report will include the expense of the vehicle, either purchased, lease or rental of the vehicle, such expenses as registration, insurance, repairs, tyres, maintenance and fuel costs. A travel log will be the same as all other councillors having to prepare their claim expenses on a trip-by-trip basis. All other expenses such as parking, taxis, accommodation and event costs will be included in the report. This will commence from the beginning of the council term 2020. This report will be publicly displayed on the council website under councillor expenses. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Can I ask any councillors wishing to second this notice and motion? Councillor Carol Ryan, I note that your second, just indicate show of hands you wish to do so. Thank you, Councillor Ryan, seconding that. Going to the mover, Councillor Colin Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quite brief when I speak to this. Look, we have a massive black hole in our councillor expenses. We don't have anything written down about the cost of the mayoral car. Out of the last 5 mayors, I'm the only one not to take a mayoral car. I found it astounding that we do things differently for the mayor's travel expenses than the councillors. Councillors are on $25,000, $26,000 a year. They're expected to write a travel log, except the mayor, who earns 3 times as much, who gets a car given to him if he chooses to take one, does not have to log anything. Basically, you get the keys, you drive where you want, and unlike the councillor who doesn't take the car, the mayor has the he's allowed to drive it for personal use. So therefore, I think, given that opportunity, a travel log, considering you paid 3 times more and having done the position, would be fair and just. Anyway, it's a black hole we have. No one knows what we spend on any of these things. We just basically have an open check in that area. I think in the aims of, as people have shared with me, they're totally into transparency. They're happy to be audited and the whole lot. I just don't understand why anyone wouldn't support it. But anyway, I look forward to listening to my fellow councillors explain themselves. Hopefully it's in the air of heading towards total transparency rather than selective. Thank you, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll go to Councillor Ryan to speak as seconder, please.
I reserve my right to speak, Mayor. Thank you.
Noted, Councillor Ryan. I'll go to Councillor Graham Moore first, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Ross. To start with, Councillor Ross, I apologise for jumping ahead of myself. I was getting a bit emotional about these particular items, and I've stated what I said in the last item, Councillor Ross, and you know where I stand with that. I just believe that it's part of the package. As the mayoral position as it has been, and I don't care what other councils do. We're Cardinia here. We do what we do. That's what we've always done, and it's part of. It's a bit like the CEO's position, or some, not even our CEOs in other jobs, wherever that position is, it is a car to use for that position and private as well as. So I just have a problem with someone having a car that's not suitable as a mayoral car in some ways, not anyone particular, and then they're actually using that and getting expenses for it to actually pay that car off. It's as simple as that. I think that the mayoral car sits in the yard and depreciates. It's insured, the whole thing that sits there for 12 months. I just will be one of those sort of things. I'm not going to foreshadow anything else. I think we may bring this up at the when we start talking about the expenses and the mayoral and council's expenses down the track somewhere. And I look forward to that conversation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I will go to Councillor Davies, please. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, bear with me. Okay. I expect accountability, transparency, and reasonable use of vehicles by Cardinia's mayors, as I expect appropriate conduct by all government officials. Council has a transparent expenses policy in place. The policies are implemented with due care. These black holes that Councillor Ross is alluding to is not correct. There's no open checkbook, and I would recommend that he reads the policy and understands the procedure, because it is transparent. I can be transparent. Whilst Councillor Ross didn't use the mayoral car, he did claim a lot of travel expenses.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Point of order. Point of order.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. So you're asking for a point of order. Can you explain your point of order, please?
I would like to know if Councillor Davies is saying that she knows where to find the figures on the cost of the mayoral car. She said she knows and she believes it's transparent. Please help me find it. Just help me find where we have those things. In 12 years... So,
Councillor Ross, we do have a vehicle usage policy for staff, and it does include the mayor of the day. So there is policies currently in place.
Well, how come
so your point of order, I will go back to Councillor.
Councillors, we've never seen it.
Well, it's on our, definitely councillors, it is available. It may be on the website, I'm not too sure, but I'm definitely aware that there is a vehicle policy for staff and the mayor, and I've read it,
The cost of the mayor's car, we'll go and have a look for it.
I will go to Councillor Davies to talk to her point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is procedure for me to start at the start of the speech again, or would you like me just to...
Just go from where you left at. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, bear with me. So I believe I discussed that I do believe Council has a transparent expenses policy in place, policies that are implemented with due care, and being a government body, any resident can also write in a freedom of information request if there was more specific detail required. I do believe the black holes statement is not correct, and when a mayor, Councillor Ross, may not have taken the car, but he did claim a lot of expenses. The mayor is the leader of our city, and a small amount of personal use is reasonable and acceptable both in policy and law, and it passes the pub test. Very common in company cars for people in senior positions to get a car. So I would like to also confirm to the public that I know that there is no evidence of any wrongdoing by Councillor Owen as a mayor. All assessments and chatter indicates that our mayor behaves appropriately. And if there was any suspicion of fraud, as a council, we would be obliged to report it to the local government inspectorate. I am very disappointed with any comments on selective transparency. I just believe that you don't need to audit everything if the rules are being followed and the evidence doesn't give need for additional audits. Like there's an appropriate amount of audits, and then there's just waste of ratepayer money. Personally, I've never had any of my expenses investigated. I've never had any of my expenses referred to the local government inspectorate, and I don't support this notice of motion, and I am incredibly disappointed by it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davies. I will go to Councillor Jeff Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, look, I won't be supporting this notice of motion because, again, it's going to be captured within our review of the councillor expenses policy. It's almost like jumping the gun to try and say, well, I'm the one who's putting this in the councillor expenses policy when we're going to have a discussion, debate of the best process towards doing that in the coming months. So I think it is pointless to bring up this point. And I welcome Councillor Ross at the time when we're having those discussions with officers. If it is appropriate to do something similar around what he is requesting here, then I'm open to that and discussing that. But look, on face value, for the mayor to keep a log trip of his travel, I think I don't see that's much point to that. Councillors keep a log trip of their travel because they get paid for every kilometre they claim. So they've got to say how many kilometres they've claimed to reimburse that. It makes sense. I think this would perhaps encourage other people to not use a mayoral car and instead use their own car. Now, as Councillor Ross pointed out, he's the only one in 5 years to use the mayoral car, but I really see a problem, as Councillor Moore pointed out. I think it's better policy to use the mayoral car. I have an old sort of, it's probably worth $2,000, my personal car outside. I could have used my own personal car and perhaps claimed $20,000 worth of travel in the time that I was mayor, but no, I thought it was much better policy to take the mayoral car instead and to represent when I'm showing up to meetings with MPs and ministers. I'm not pulling up in my old beat up car. I'm pulling up in something that's reflective of the executive role that we hold in that position of mayor. And I can tell you at $20,000 a year for expenses for mayors to drive their personal car, that's I think in every 2 years you'd buy a new mayoral car every 2 years and you'd dump it in Port Phillip Bay afterwards. You wouldn't even have to sell it again, and you would be probably saving money almost. So I won't be supporting this because I do welcome these conversations when we come to reviewing the councillor expense policy, and that's a better time to capture this idea as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Any further councillors wishing to speak before I say some words? Then going to Councillor Ryan. Firstly, I don't take this as a personal direction or like a response from Councillor Ross to myself. I see it as to the position as mayor, so I don't see it as a directed response to me personally. I just wanted to say that I don't believe there's a black hole. I don't believe there's an open check. We do have a current vehicle usage policy that is relates to the mayoral position. I'm along the lines of other speakers. I think it's important for a mayoral car to be available. I'm along the same boats of Councillor Jeff Springfield, a 2008 Holden Commodore that's currently being retired at the moment and ready to come out when I've finished the role. But I think it is important when you are turning up to meetings with ministers and so forth like that, that you're in an appropriate vehicle that's reliable, that will get you to the meetings when required. It's really important. There's already things like fuel cards that obviously get checked internally as well. Can I remind councillors, Cardinia Shire Council, through the Audit Committee, went through a quite considerable work of an independent audit in relation to councillor expenses and processes of claiming, etc., that looked at these things. And that got a tick of approval, council's current practices in relation to mayoral vehicles and allowances and expenses. Council has already implemented one of those recommendations is basically saying that councillors must submit their expenses in a timely manner, and we've got rules around that. But I just remind councillors to have a look at that recent audit report that our audit committee engaged, but I just want to acknowledge that. But I think all these things will be up for discussion, Councillor Ross, when we do review the councillors' expense policy. And I won't be supporting your notice of motion. I will go to Councillor Ryan to speak as seconder. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Brown, sorry.
Well,
I
think I did clearly say that, but I'll allow that, Councillor Brown. I don't think I saw your hand up before, but I'll go to Councillor Brown. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mayor, it was a dead heat when you were speaking.
I tried to give plenty of allowance, but I'll hear from you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've listened carefully to the arguments, and I must say that I do agree with most of the arguments that have been put forward. I think that we need to have the Mayor present himself in the best possible way. I think that to give the Mayor a reliable car, I've certainly got no issues at all with the Mayor using the car for his personal use, because I'm sure that it would be in a frugal manner and it would be in a responsible manner. I think this notice of motion goes too far in respect of the content as to what needs to be reported. So I will not be supporting this notice of motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll go to Councillor Jeff Springfield. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Ryan, please. Thank you, Councillor Ryan, to speak as seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ross, in your motion there, and everyone else that's had an input. Again, it's about transparency. It's about accountability. I don't see this as pointing a finger at our mayor. Our mayor has been above board, and I don't have an issue whatsoever there. I don't have an issue with the fact that you do need a car that's reliable, and when we are meeting ministers and prime ministers for that matter, you know, you do need to arrive in a better car, and especially sometimes we might have to drive ministers around. I'm not sure if you do, but that's a possibility. I'd like to see, you know, a good debate on this policy, and, you know, declaring our expenses, I think it really just aims at all of us. It's not, I don't see it in particular, it may be worded that way, but I still see it that we're all responsible for our travelling. But I would value, I'm just trying to look at my notes there, please bear with me. And look, it's a good package that that the mayor gets, because it's a necessity. But I think, you know, again, you're getting residents that are asking those questions, and that's possibility why it's been brought up. So in reference to looking at residents asking these questions, and Councillor Ross was game enough to put it forward for open discussion, I think I will support him on that, because we need to, again, have an open discussion on this. But if we're going to have a discussion on a new policy or a debate, then I'm all for it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan, thank you. Go to the mover of this notice of motion, Councillor Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start my summing up, I'd like to put a question to the CEO, Carol Jeffs, if I could, please. To the CEO, I'd just like to know, it's been suggested that a report exists on our website about the expenses of the mayor's car and expenses. As far as you know, where would I find that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have time to check myself at the moment, Councillor Ross, so I'll have to take that question on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. And my second question is, does a such report exist that would have similar things as my report in it, the cost of the car, the expenses of the mayor and the whole lot? Does that report exist, and has it existed in the past with Inside Council?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there isn't a report as you're describing specifically for the mayoral car, Councillor Ross, but there are calculations that our cars are based on that are linked to the policy that Councillor Owen was speaking about. That is the same for senior officers and the mayoral use of the car. So that encapsulates some of the costs that you're talking about. But in terms of a specific report for the mayoral use of the car with all of the details that you're outlining, there currently is not a specific report as you've described.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ms. Jeffs. On the balance that there's some information already existing, a report doesn't seem like it's as far-fetched as what some have suggested. I just want to emphasise with the mayor, I've worked with the mayor for 12 years. I have no problem with the mayor at all. I see him as a very forthright person who I get along with well, and we might differ in opinion on certain things. But at the end of the day, I would never accuse Councillor Brett of doing the wrong thing. I've never seen him do the wrong thing, and I wouldn't suggest that at all. This is just a thing about a hole inside the council that has never been answered, that we really don't have our foot on. I wanted to really try and, oh geez, the light's gone out, sorry. Maybe if I had a more expensive car, the light wouldn't cut out every few minutes. Anyway, I just wanted to say that this is about beefing up our transparency and doing some audit things so it left no stone unturned before the community, so they know what things cost on council. Anyway, I'd like to think my fellow councillors will support this motion, but as it was pointed out, sometimes we need to bring it back in the future because they need other things answered. So it'd be 3 months before it could come back. Anyway, I look forward to councillors, and I thank you for your input. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. So, councillors, I put forward the motion to vote on notice of motion 1061 in Councillor Ross's name. Those all in favour, please indicate by a show of hands, please. Councillor Ross, I gather that I can't see your face, but I gather you're voting for that.
I'm down
okay. Those against, please indicate by a show of hands. Okay, that is lost.
Division. Can I call for a division again, please, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. No worries, Councillor Ross. You have called a division. Those councillors in support of this notice of motion, please indicate by a show of hands, please, again. Councillor Ross, I can't see you on my screen, unfortunately, but I see your hand up there.
My hand there. No worries. Thank you.
So, Councillor Ross, I call those in favour, Councillor Ross, and also Councillor Ryan. Those against councillors, please indicate. So I'll go around. I call Councillor Jeff Springfield, Councillor Tammy Radford, Councillor Jack Kowalczyk, Councillor Graham Moore, Councillor Stephanie Davies, Councillor Ray Brown, and Councillor Brett Owen. So that notice of motion is lost. Moving on to the next item, which is notice of motion 1062 in Councillor Ross's name. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
I've got the speaker on. Sorry about that. I just have to go to another page. I move notice of motion 1062 that council governance rules be amended to require an attendance record be displayed on the council website of councillors' attendances at meetings. The meetings will include councillor briefings, town planning meetings, general council meetings and special council meetings. The list of attendees will be an ongoing total for each councillor for the term of council. The list will have an attendance, an apology, or either being stated for each event and be included in the individual's totals. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Can I ask for a seconder, please? I note Councillor Ryan is seconding that. Thank you. Going to Councillor Ross to speak to his notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably the simplest notice of motion I've put up tonight. This is nothing more than what other councils do to be best practice. When I looked through our own council site to try and get a total of attendances, it took you so long that you would be sitting there for an hour trying to total up. If you went back to every council meeting, you opened the meetings, you looked through the document, you tried to find who was in terms of comparing other councils. I simply went and I picked them out randomly. I picked up the Frankston City Council, councillor attendance. All I did was Google that. Two things popped up. I clicked on one of them and it took me straight to a box that showed me councillor attendances, and it was total. And they've had it there for years. Then I went to the Moreland City Council. I thought I'll pick an inner Melbourne one. Moreland City Council, councillor attendances. And that one there, in fact, when you went to it, there was a link straight away to councillor attendance and expenses. When I went there, you could see the last 8 years of councillor expenses and attendances. It was really basic. It was really easy. And it would be something that if you wanted to discover that and look for it, you could find it easily. Anybody could do it. The way that we have it buried away, I defy anybody to give me a total of, let's say, 3 years of councillor attendances and do it within 5 minutes, going back through all the records and totalling it up. If we're about transparency and total transparency, this is a really, really easy one. And this is what best practice is. Surely we're going to support total transparency on this one. Anyway, I look forward to hearing my fellow councillors speak to me about why attendance and having an attendance register there, which totals things up, is either the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, and we shouldn't have that, and we should just hide it away somewhere. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I will go to Councillor Ryan as the seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Okay, noted, Councillor Ryan. Other speakers? I'll go to Councillor Moore first, please. Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a sort of echo. It's getting a bit of an echo in my room here at the moment. It's nearly past my bedtime, by the way, Mr. Mayor, so I'm getting a bit drowsy over here. I can't see the relevance. The relevance here, I just don't understand. I get what Councillor Ross is trying to do here, and I know in former years before we've had attendances has been an issue between councillors, and I don't think that will be that way in this council. I know it won't be. I just can't understand the relevance of particularly using other councils. I don't know how many times I say this. Other councils do their way and they can do what they want. I don't care. That's nothing to do with Cardinia. We do it our way. We're our own council, own people, and I just believe that that we do it, and we are accountable for actions, and we are accountable to our community. And I know in the past, yes, there's been a few issues and with certain councillors, but you know what? That's their problem. That's their problem, really. It's not ours. And I think that we do the right thing by our community, and that's all I'm going to say, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I'm getting tired of the whole thing. But anyway, I'll let other councillors speak, and I'll hop off. But thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. We'll go to Councillor Davies to speak next. Thank you, Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not supporting this motion. The contributions that a councillor makes has only a small amount to do with the attendance at the meetings Councillor Ross has stated. There is reading, analysis, and doing your own pub tests on a myriad of information. There is collaboration with council staff. There is community engagement. And most importantly, there is teamwork with fellow councillors, MPs, and community groups. And to my knowledge, each and every councillor on Cardinia's council has over a 90% attendance rate. So I don't think we need a scoreboard. I don't think we need to be ranked against each other. We need to work together. This information, it's already public. It's already available and easy to find. These comments regarding best practice and transparency versus total transparency, I'm really concerned about these words being misused. And there are 79 Victorian councils, and just because 2 have some sort of scoreboard, it does not mean it would benefit Cardinia. I don't want to burden council staff with extra work, which thus incurs cost to ratepayers for a political scoreboard. And I want to make it clear that I do not support this motion. I do support improving the website. I do support transparency of information, but this suggestion and being delivered as a notice of motion is not helpful and not going to achieve an improved improved communication to the community. Thank you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Ross, we're having issues seeing your video. Can you turn your video on, please? Or
It's on. It's on. I can see myself clearly in it over here in the corner. I don't know why others can't, because I'll actually video myself and show you how I can actually see myself. I don't know why it doesn't come through on the screen, but I can actually see quite clearly myself here. I don't know why.
We just can't see.
Maybe I need a better car, as some people suggested, that has a better light in it.
No. Councillor Radford, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have voiced within the chambers my opinion on this one. I don't see it as being really a necessary notice of motion. Our attendance is publicly listed. We're visible when we go to meetings and when we're not at meetings. The role is more than attending a meeting, as Councillor Davies had pointed out, so I won't go into all of that again. But again, it involves emails and phone calls and things like that that are not recorded, and that needs to be acknowledged as part of our role as well. I don't want people to feel, if they're thinking about putting their hand up as a councillor, that if they may need to skip a meeting because they might be a carer of a child or whatever, that they don't put their hand up to be a councillor because they may have to skip a meeting occasionally, and I don't think that's fair to put that pressure on people either. So I just want to point out that the role of a councillor is performed in many different ways, not just attendance to meetings, and meetings are publicly listed anyway, so I don't see the point of the notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Any other speakers? Councillor Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got mixed feelings on this. I personally feel that the meetings are so important in respect of briefings. Are so important that councillors go to those briefings in particular to hear what the officers have to say and pay them the respect that their portfolio deserves when they put up propositions and reports. Of course, we have phone calls and we answer texts and we do all these types of things. I understand that. But to be really informed, you need to go to briefings. And of course, if you have the legitimate apologies, that'll be taken into account on the website. Nobody expects you to come to council at the expense of everything else. If you have a legitimate reason for missing a briefing, well, so be it. But for all this to be lumped into one basket, and I think the last annual report, and we did get a little bit of a rap over the knuckles from the community, somebody, and I could name them, but I won't, who said the council only had such a percentage of attendance this particular year. Now, that was probably because of a couple of councillors dragging the attendance down. I was probably one of them because I was ill, but I make no apologies for that. So I think to just have a ongoing record of what you do when you undertake the role of a councillor, that you do come to meetings, that you're really interested in how council works, because you're not going to learn it through telephone calls and stuff like that. You need to sit in the chamber. You need to listen. And it came up once tonight where we had to explain something that was at the briefing last week regarding these notices of motion, that if that particular councillor had been there, they would have known what the question they asked, they would have known the answer. So, as I said, and also we're going now where we're looking for we're putting a proposition for a salary increase. I think that we're obliged, when we can get the meetings, we get there. If you've got a legitimate excuse, so be it. But what's the problem? That's the question. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I will go to Councillor Jeff Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, as was pointed out to me by council officers, that that the requirements within this notice of motion are included in the governance rules adopted by council in August last year, and in their words, so this notice of motion is irrelevant. So I think what Councillor Ross is trying to capture here is, and what Councillor Brown's pointed out is that encouraging a strong amount of attendance it is a good thing, and I believe that every councillor here does so to the best of their ability. But at times when there's something comes up, family issues or health comes up, then there is councillors that haven't been able to attend multiple meetings in the past, and that's okay as well. So I think, look, I won't support this no submission because it already exists. We already do it. So it's a bit more. I don't know. Let's find the transparency towards this. I think the transparency is that it is a bit of a scorecard type of thing. And look, if Councillor Ross was concerned that it's buried away in the website, unfortunately, this notice of motion does not discuss any element of what part of the website it should be on or how easy it is to discover this information. It would not help that situation. But he should come to the council chamber and discuss with us to say, hey, I have concerns here. I would like to see this more easily accessible to the community, the information that already exists. And we can have a discussion then about how do we make that information more easily accessible to the community. This notice of motion does not attach to that at all. It does not. It's just repeating stuff that's already happened. So someone else can say that they're creating this environment. So sorry, but I will not be supporting this notice of motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I will go to Councillor Jack Kowarczyk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually took my hand down. Councillor Springfield stole my thunder there, but I'll just quickly speak to it anyway. I do support it, Councillor Ross, but I won't be voting for it, if that makes sense, because as Councillor Springfield said, it's superfluous. It's already underway. I'm a little bit curious as to your motives for bringing this up, though, seeing as we actually don't run against each other. And whilst it's important for the community to know how often we're attending meetings and it's the community's job to hold us accountable, when it comes time for re-election, generally speaking, most of these councillors stay in their own ward. So Councillor Moore's attendance rate to my attendance rate is by the by. So, you know what I mean? Like unless Graham is running against me or vice versa, it's really irrelevant. So, again, I don't have a problem. I'm at 100% meeting attendance rate, as are you, Councillor Ross, and I hope to stay there. The only reason I wouldn't be staying there would be for a family emergency. So I'm worried, Councillor Ross, if this could have unintended consequences of being maybe a little bit prejudiced against women who are more likely to be looking after younger families. So therefore, I mean, just potentially, Colin, I mean, these things, so for example, as chair of the called community, when we're discussing meeting times, we have to be very conscious that to try and get a good pool of people to be able to come to these meetings, that we have a good time for it, because if we have it in the middle of the day, sometimes men can't come who are at work. If we have it at night, sometimes women can't come who are looking after families. Now, I know that's traditional stereotypes, but we do have to be mindful that as a council, we have the best practice going forward. So again, this is all superfluous because this has all been picked up already. But if we're having the conversation anyway, an alternative could be you could highlight a drop rate below 80%. So if you were genuinely worried that one councillor was paying no mind to meetings, you could highlight it on the front page of the website the minute it dropped below 80%. And then that councillor would have to go out of their way to identify why they've missed so many meetings. But as Councillor Brown said, sometimes when you miss a meeting, it's no one's business. Now, I know we're elected representatives, and if it was a continual occurrence, I think people have the right to ask for it. But if a councillor misses one meeting and they say to me, it's important that I miss this meeting, but I'm not telling you why, because it could be for health reasons or family reasons, I'm going to support that councillor. I'm absolutely going to support that councillor. So, again, I probably went on a bit longer than I wanted to. I apologise, councillors, for that. At the end of the day, the whole thing's superfluous, so I won't be supporting it. But Councillor Ross, I support what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. Any further speakers? I'll briefly say some words. Question to the CEO, if that's possible. It's been mentioned by a number of councillors that these rules already exist, these governance rules. Can you provide comments to councillors in relation to what are those rules and how are they implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the governance rules are required under the new Local Government Act 2020 and were required to be adopted by council, which they already include provisions to provide this information on council's website. and the first report will be up next week. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, CEO, for clarifying that. I too, with other councillors, mentioned that there's more to a role of a councillor, effective councillor, than just mere attendance. It is important to return phone calls. It is important to respond to emails in a timely manner. So attendance is one aspect of a councillor, but obviously other roles is very important as well in relation to the effectiveness of that councillor. I've already raised with the CEO whether briefings could be possibly recorded, or, so that's being investigated for those councillors unable to partake in a briefing. Councillors can, maybe obviously be part of that briefing and understand what went on in that briefing at a later time. So I won't be supporting this notice of motion, as stated before by the CEO, that it's already, adopted by council. I will go to Councillor Ryan to speak as a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Thank you, Councillor Ross, for your notice of motion. Thank you all to everyone's opinion, all the councillors, and thank you for your input, Carol, on reports. One of the things that did come out of the annual report, and I'm just following up from what Councillor Brown said, is that our percentage rate went right down. And when that went out to the community and other sources, that was enough to be questioned, that our attendance was absolutely lousy. So, and that's in the report. So we can't say that didn't happen. But in saying that now, I see something a little bit different that probably no one's really looked at. Carol probably has thought of the same thing. Attending these meetings, one, it's important, it's part of our role, but also attending physically, well, lately it's been Zoom, but that could be a safety reason too, that we're attending because, and who is safe under the roof of chambers. And also there have been times where you may have asked what your attendance numbers has been and you haven't been given the answer. You've had to rely on yourself. So I hope that does improve, and I believe it will. I think one of the other important things, this is just about attendance within council at the chambers. As a councillor, we do an enormous amount of work. We don't just come to chambers. We do go to events. We do follow through with our emails. We do follow through with our phone calls. We do go and visit residents. We do go to AGM meetings. I can go on, but they're examples. Our time is limited in some ways, but we structure it in such a way because we have to. And I think more to the attendance, I think it's more just the meetings that we attend on those nights. Doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything about the councillors that we're not doing any other work behind the scenes. It's just saying that while we're in those meetings with our officers, again, Councillor Brown brought it up, we need to respect the officers. They've worked very, very hard to do their reports and follow up and their investigations. And for us to sit there in chambers and respectfully listen to what they've got to present to us, and it gives us an opportunity to ask them in person or by Zoom that, do I have any questions in reference to this policy? Is there a policy there? Where do I go from here? It's continual questions that we have that opportunity. So I see it more as an opportunity to be there, be safe, but also have the opportunity to talk to our officers, because they really are an important part of our work as well. So I will be supporting this, but I again, if anything further goes from this, I value that as well. But I think I'm in two minds, but I still will support it at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I will go to Councillor Ross to sum up on his notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for sharing your views on this matter. I must say tonight it's been rather interesting. I've been erred on being gender biased. I've been erred on being dishonest. I've been erred on accusing others at times. I try and stick to the issue that I've got.
Councillor Ross, can you just sum up, please? Thank you.
I'll stop. Sorry, Councillor Davies had something to say. She spoke over.
So point of order has been called by Councillor Davies. Did you want to talk to that point of order, please?
Yes. Councillor Ross is making statements accusing his fellow councillors of gender bias and not being transparent in other matters. That's not relevant. He needs to return to sum up the notice of motion as opposed to make accusations against myself and colleagues.
Thank you. I do rule on that. I tend to agree. Councillor Ross, can you summarise? And I don't believe any councillor was suggesting that you were that way. Thank you.
Okay, I look forward to looking through the tape. Anyway, it's rather interesting. When our previous CEO used to run before an election, he would say to all the candidates that if you get elected on council, we have a briefing session where we don't want to waste our people's time and staff. They'll turn up, they'll give you a briefing on everything that happens. We don't want to double them up and have them to do it another time. He said the only night you're expected really to put aside if you were to get elected is a Monday night for a briefing and then a town planning meeting or a briefing and a general council meeting or just the briefing. I find it interesting that tonight this has been in some way, that's how I've understood it over 12 years. Everyone's got reasons why they don't come at times, and that's totally understandable. I've actually moved twice. People would have months off because they had personal issues and I moved it so they could do that.
Point of order.
Oh, here we go.
Former CEOs and people moving house and former councillors isn't relevant to the notice of motion. Can it please be summed up concisely for your consideration, Mr Mayor?
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Ross, can you sort of summarise what the notice of motion? You've probably got only a minute left. Thanks, Councillor Ross.
With all respect, Councillor Davies.
Point of order. Critique of my conduct is not relevant to the notice of motion for your consideration, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Davies. Councillor Ross, can I just ask you to sum up the notice of motion? Please really just summarise.
Point of order, and I go to speak to that. I find it hard to believe that you can bob your head up, you can say things.
Councillor Ross, you need to summarise, please. Otherwise, your time will be exhausted.
Absolutely amazing. Anyway, I must say this would have to be one of the very few forums, and I've worked as a union organiser and gone to workplaces.
Point of order.
Right. Councillor Ross, if you're not going to sum up,
I am allowed to share what I choose.
Councillor Ross, you've got a notice of motion.
It is irrelevant.
Summarise.
It is relevant.
30 seconds to go. Thank you, Councillor Ross. Please summarise your motion.
Mr Mayor, have you taken into account the point of order's time to be taken off?
Yes, you've got 2 minutes, and I think I've been very
well, actually, the
point
of order's had more time than me. Yep. Point of order's had more time than me.
Summarise. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
As a union organiser, I dealt with attendance all the time, and I find it absolutely astounding that people could say the people who pay you to be there is not important. Your attendance. I've seen sessional payments on boards where people turn up when they get paid, and when
point of order relevance.
Get their money.
Councillor Ross, can I just say your time has exhausted unless you put a notice of
I'll ask if someone
put a time extension.
I'll ask for someone to put up a notice of motion so I can continue.
So you're asking for additional time to sum up.
And at least have the same time as other people who earlier on in the
Ross,
shared for
Councillor
more.
Ross, I've been very fair with your time. Can you 30 seconds to sum up? Otherwise, that's the end. We'll go to the vote.
I find it astounding that people would belittle attendance as an attendance total.
Point of order, factual.
Okay. Keep going, Councillor Ross. Just
Was that include? Can I have the 30 seconds again?
Councillor Ross, continue. Thank you. Otherwise, we'll go to the no.
Anyway, that's their choice. If they just want to cut in on every second word, they can if they like. Anyway, I just have to ignore that and keep talking over the top. Anyway, in relation to attendance, this is an important thing. It is important that people turn up. I've had employers tell me that if what am I meant to do with this person who doesn't turn up? And you know what? If they keep paying them money, anyway, if people think and also too, I'm just having a point of order on Councillor Springfield on this. Last year,
point of order, Councillor.
All right, Councillor Ross, your time has exhausted.
He was one of the people who actually voted against the attendance.
Code of conduct violation.
Councillor Ross, we will put the notice of motion up, please. Thank you.
So to tell me
Ross
that it was passed last year is ridiculous, because it wasn't.
All right, councillors, I'll put the notice of motion. Thank you. All those in favour of notice of motion 1062, please indicate by a show of hands, please.
I'm in the dark, but my hand's up.
So, those against, please indicate by a show of hands. Okay, that is lost. Okay.
Can I call for a division, please, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, a division has been called. Those councillors in support of notice of motion 1062, please indicate by a show of hands, please. So, Councillor Ross, I can't see you, but have you got your hand up?
I will push on this, Mr. Mayor. There you go.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we can't see your video. I don't know what the issue is.
I'll take a few pictures of it so you can see that the actual equipment get given.
All right, for those in favour, I state and call Councillor Ray Brown, Councillor Colin Ross and Councillor Carol Ryan. Those against this notice of motion, please indicate by a show of hands, please. Thank you. I call upon Councillor Jeff Springfield, Councillor Tammy Radford, Councillor Jack Kowarczyk, Councillor Graham Moore, Councillor Stephanie Davies and Councillor Brett Owen. That notice of motion is lost. Moving on to the final councillor notice of motion. That is notice of motion 1063, also in the name of Councillor Ross. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Have I been taken off mute? I'm just wondering, because yes. I know that you can do it on your end. Okay.
We can hear you, Councillor Ross. Go ahead.
I have been taken off mute. Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notice of motion, I move 1063. The council from the date of this motion advises and invites the councillor of his or her single ward to attend and participate in any council meetings, attendances of managers, discussions, meetings of any state and federal MPs. This will include visits of the mayor and the deputy or the deputy mayor. Openings announcements will be included. The councillor will be contacted as early as possible by email, phone and text with details of the relevant event, time and date of event, so the councillor can RSVP to attend and participate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. You've moved that notice of motion. That's been seconded by Councillor Carol Ryan. Just indicate by a show of hands if that's correct, Councillor Ryan. Thank you. Moving to Councillor Ross to speak to his motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In moving this motion, the reason it's been put up, we've moved from multi-member wards to single-member wards. And in doing so, we need a mindset change in this area. In the past, we had a group of people who could be invited along to things, and councillors usually would attend things. When it's a single member ward, your ward has voted for you to be elected to represent them and to know what goes on in that area. And if you're someone like myself or you, Councillor Owen, at least half of every second house or more has voted for you to actually be elected. So therefore, it's very different to the old model that we had, where basically you had multi-people in there, and you couldn't have all the people turn up at one time, because you could have 4 councillors turning up to one event in Central Ward. What I'm asking for in this is to consider the single member ward councillor in that area, so when something happens in their area, they are duly invited. And I think the rest of it speaks for itself. Anyway, I look forward to hearing why councillors mightn't support this. I hope they genuinely do, but I'd be surprised. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Carol Ryan, a seconder to speak.
Reserve my right to speak, Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, I got tongue-tied then. I do apologise.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. We note that you reserved your right. I will go to Councillor Graham Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this, surprisingly, only because I think we do it already anyway. The Mayor invites the councillors, and I think our assistants who PAs who ring and get us to appointments or whatever, no doubt about I've got no worries. So I think we do this at the moment. So I've got no problem about putting this as a notice of motion and putting it in place, because I think it is there anyway. So you want to put it in concrete, you want to make it as a rule. We want to be governed by rules. Okay, let's make it a rule if you want to. So I support this one, Councillor Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Davies, thank you.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, bear with me just a moment, please. I do not support this motion. I'd like to point out that the Mayor and, when not available, Deputy Mayor are the official spokesperson of Council, not the Ward Councillor. And this is stated within the Local Government Act. When the new Cardinia Road level crossing was opened late last year, despite it being right between my and Councillor Radford's wards, we were not invited. This was because it was a highly significant event with restrictions on the number of attendees. They wanted the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor to attend. The media were there. And this was understood and respected by me and Councillor Radford. If this notice of motion was in place, there would have been an administrative process to change that. At no time on Council at Cardinia have I ever not been invited to or included anywhere where I felt I needed to be there. It's in fact the opposite. I find that I'm so busy that I actually need to pick and choose and often ask the council staff or mayor if I can be an apology. Why has Councillor Ross even raised this motion? Because it seems highly unnecessary. Why put bureaucratic rules and concrete in place if there doesn't need to be? If any councillor is finding they're not being invited when they think they should, I would suggest that it's a more appropriate option to speak privately with the mayor or the CEO, rather than raising this in the public forum as a notice of motion. We do it already. Why impose additional rules? Why make life harder than it needs to be? Why not be efficient with council process and ratepayer money? So I confirm I do not support this motion. It is completely unnecessary. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillor Jeff Springfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll just note that it has been difficult during COVID times that we're currently experiencing to have all attendees come to events and such. And, you know, so look, I would say in my 5 years of council, I've never felt like I've been left out or excluded for anything. And so I think this is unnecessary, this notice of motion. I also think it's going to be difficult to cohesively administer this for the staff to go, well, this event here, and we got to make sure this comes along as well when it comes into official council law as a notice of motion, rather than it being an adopted a courtesy, a policy of courtesy, which has always been adhered to, that we're invited to. Look, I just might point out too that the actual notice of motion is badly worded, so it doesn't actually achieve what Councillor Ross wants to achieve. I think we all understand what he wants to achieve, but when stating that the councillor of his or her single ward to attend and participate any council meetings, attendances of managers, discussions, meetings of any state or federal MPs, this will include mayor, deputy mayor. It doesn't state in their respective wards, so it actually says that any single ward councillor, which is all 9 of us, has to be invited towards anything that ever happens. If you actually read this properly through the English language, it doesn't. It needs to actually state in and her selective wards. Now, I realise that we all understand that's what it's trying to achieve here, but unfortunately, we're talking about putting this into local law by adopting this as a notice of motion. And in local law, Councillor Ross should know after 12 years or so on council that the wording needs to be perfect to achieve these types of things. That's look, also just to note that many of these events are organised by ministers and state MPs, and they will tell us who's invited. If it's a councillor event, it's very easy for councillor-run events to be for council officers or the mayor to invite any councillors along. But if a specific minister requests the mayor's attendance and no other councillors, then we have to respect that, and I think it's ridiculous to not respect it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I go to Councillor Jack Kowarczyk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ross and my fellow councillors. I really feel for Councillor Ross tonight because I'm not being facetious. He's genuinely made some good points, and this notice of motion is the one I was closest to supporting. Councillor Ross, I was nearly there, particularly when Graham got on board. He made some good points as well. I support this in principle. However, I actually support a stronger idea. But to Jeff's point, I sort of think it's already in place. I think a precedent's been set. I think the mayor identified this with an early email after being elected and saying that that was what he wanted to do. And to be fair, he's done that. And I actually think we should go a little bit further in that neighbouring wards, such as Councillor Davies and Radford's, or mine and Councillor Ryan's, or what have you, could actually work together. And I've stated on record in the past that I think all Pakenham ward councillors should work together because it is such a big area. And I think it shows good teamwork. It shows the community that we're working together. So I'm worried that this notice of motion, again, provides a sort of rigidity. You know, it's very inflexible. If we vote for this, that doesn't allow the mayor of the day or the council staff or the CEO a little bit of discretion with who they invite. So that's why I'm not supporting it tonight, Colin, but I do support the principle of teamwork that you're trying to achieve in this. And I also think you are 100% right that even though we have a great mayor today in Councillor Owen, who's happy to have that teamwork and is happy to have the ward councillors come along, we don't know what that will look like in the future. So you make a good point there, Councillor Ross, but I think that the 9 councillors we have are all on the same page, and whoever is mayor into the future will continue this policy of inviting the ward councillor and perhaps the neighbouring councillors as well once we're out of the COVID pandemic. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. Any further comments, councillors, before I go to the seconder? There being none, I'll just make some brief comments. I do support the comments of Councillor Davies, Kowarczyk and Springfield. Definitely it's my intention since taking up the role to be more open and involve ward councillors, and that includes involving media statements by the ward councillors for media releases. I think that's really important. Now, we do have a different structure that will allow single ward councillors to be involved in that process. Really important. I do take your note, Councillor Kowarczyk, about it is really up to the mayor of the day, and I think if councillors aren't feeling that the mayor is straying away from that sort of intention, definitely raise that with he or she. Definitely, as Councillor Springfield did say, we are dictated by, when it's a state or federal event, we are dictated of what their requirements are. And that issue in relation to level crossing removal and also some further improvements to Cardinia Road was examples where they were state government announcements, and even though I asked whether ward councillors could attend, because of I think COVID was one of them, really limitations of numbers. So as councillors, we need to respect that. And as Mayor Colin, in the past, you know how some of these work. The trust with government and the workings with government, but definitely council events is definitely my intention, and it is all of council's intention that we involve the ward councillors, and where we can and it's appropriate, the wider council list of. It's really important. I also accept and really acknowledge your comments, Councillor Kowaczyk, about teamwork. We've got a very different sort of setup than previous councils. Pakenham is split into four or five wards, and there is so many things that we can work together as a group of councillors, Pakenham councillors, to work together for the positive of, for instance, Pakenham. And those examples, I think definitely we would have the wider council, councillor attendance there. So I do note it can be quite restrictive. Your notice of motion, Colin, Councillor Ross. So that's my views. I won't be supporting the notice of motion. I think it's already happening. Thank you. Go to Councillor Ryan.
Sorry, Mayor, I was away with the fairies then. I just wanted to clarify something that Councillor Springfield said in the wording. It does state that that the council from the date of this motion advises and invites the councillor of his or her ward. So it did say his or her ward. So I just wanted to correct that. You probably didn't read it. It's in small writing.
I did read that. It doesn't specify where the meeting is having it. It says his or her ward to participate any council meetings, and it doesn't say in. It doesn't then go back to say in that respective ward.
Right.
That's the problem with it.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. Go to Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor Springfield. I just wanted to clarify some things. Sorry, Mayor. Yeah, I support the principle, and it's all about teamwork again. And I have to admit that the Mayor has involved us a lot more than we had been probably in the last decade. And I do understand that there is a role that when the ministers are requesting someone, well then that's understandable. I think it's more about what Councillor Ross is trying to get across is that if it's possible that the ward councillor of that ward, wherever that official opening is, then they are given a preference as to being invited. I think that it's more about the wording. I mean, it's the same as we went to the off-leash dog park with the Mayor. There was only certain ones that could go, limited because we had to restrict the numbers again. But in principle, I will support it. But again, it's left open for another discussion, I think, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Going to Councillor Ross to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I find it really interesting listening to Councillor Springfield. I think he should get a job working on the defence.
Point of order.
Point
of order.
I think he should.
So, Councillor Davies.
Councillor Davies, talk. Stop my time.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Davies, your point of order, please.
My point of order is Councillor Ross is saying that Councillor Springfield should get a job. Councillor Springfield's career is irrelevant to the notice of motion, so I would appreciate if my colleagues on council would refer to the argument as opposed to the person. I believe this is also potentially an inflammatory remark and might be a violation of the Code of Conduct, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Can I just ask Councillor Ross just to obviously summarise his notice of motion without reflecting on...
Mr. Mayor, I didn't even get to finish my sentence before someone...
Continue, thanks, Councillor Ross.
I didn't even know what I was saying, but I'll leave it anyway. If they're going to guess with a crystal ball what I'm saying...
Point of order, please.
Anyway...
Point of order, please, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Davies.
Councillor Ross has just said if they're going to guess with a crystal ball, I presume he's referring to me as I did make that original. I believe that's a code of conduct violation. I don't guess things. I actually called the point of motion, which was supported by yourself, Mayor Councillor Owen, and I believe it's a code of conduct violation to suggest that I used a crystal ball in my work.
Council.
And I prefer it to improve conduct towards me, please.
Councillor Davies, I note your comments. I do ask Councillor Ross to please summarise and notice a motion without reflecting on particular councillors. Just the issues at hand, please, Councillor.
Please, Mr. Mayor, I'll run things past Councillor Davies in future.
Councillor Ross, that is not appropriate.
With what I've got to say before she jumps in.
Councillor Ross.
She should sum up for me. Councillor Davies should. She knows what I'm going to say before I say it.
Councillor Ross, I ask you to please speak to your notice of motion. Don't reflect on other councillors, please. It's your time to speak to your notice of motion and why you want councillors supporting. Please don't reflect on councillors.
Can I get just a point here? If a councillor has commented on something in my notice of motion, have I got the right to correct or speak about what they said to me, or can I no longer ever, or any of us, ever talk about what somebody shared in the conversation? Is that what you're having as the directive? No one can ever speak again.
I think you instead of reflecting on councillors, themselves, please speak to the items of matter. Okay, discussion.
So can
it's your time to speak to your notice of motion, please, Councillor Ross.
Okay, I just want to know if Councillor Davies has got anything more to say.
Councillor Ross, please speak to you. This is your time precious. You need to speak and summarise.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I just think this is really straight up. And as most councillors have said, we do it anyway, so why not support it? Anyway, I'm sure some people will find a way to not support something that we do anyway. I'll be interested to see what comes out of this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll put the notice of motion 1063 in Councillor Ross's name to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands, please. Okay, so Councillor Ross, you're voting. Can you please clarify that? I cannot see you. Yes, I note that. Those against, please indicate by a show of hands, please.
Can I call for a division again, please, Mr. Mayor?
Wait, I haven't actually announced the determination of the vote. The vote is lost. The notice of motion is lost. I do acknowledge that you've called a division, Councillor Ross. Those in favour, councillors, please indicate by a show of hands. Sorry, show of hands. So I call upon Councillor Ray Brown, Councillor Carol Ryan, Councillor Graham Moore, and Councillor Ross. Those councillors against this notice of motion, please indicate by a show of hands, please. Thank you. I call upon Councillor Jeff Springfield, Councillor Tammy Radford, Councillor Jack Kowalczyk, Councillor Davies, and Councillor Brett Owen. That notice of motion is lost. So moving on to the agenda. That concludes discussion of the items withdrawn. May I have a mover, please, to adopt the officer's recommendation for the remaining items? Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Kowalczyk. Thank you, Councillor Davies. Councillors, all those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands. All right, that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to reports or minutes of committees. I note that reports from various committees have been received in addition to the minutes of recent council briefing sessions, and these are available if any councillors wish to view them. Councillors, we move to council reports. I note it's getting late, but are there any matters in which councillors would like to report on, please? Councillors, if you do, please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it very short and brief because I've just lost my notes on it. So one of the things that I attended to was the Don Jackson off-leash dog park official opening. We're the first of many to be opened. It was enjoyable. Councillor or Mayor and myself went to have photos done a few weeks before that and took our dogs, so that was quite interesting. So but people around there, it's on Ahern Road, and it's great, and it's been used since it's been open, so lots and lots of events that are happening there, so please go along and take your dog along. I went to the AGM meeting for the calisthenics in Pakenham, and it's an identity that is becoming very, very large in numbers, and we're at the moment looking into a larger environment for them, because the Lily Pond House is probably getting a little bit small for the numbers. So these tiny little ones starting calisthenics, amazing, right up to, it doesn't matter what age you are. When I went there, I took my clubs that I was in calisthenics and gymnastics when I was a kid. So had the clubs, and they were quite taken in by, I still kept them. I went to the Pakenham Bowls official opening for their new roof there, all season roofing. Fantastic day, and I think many more to come, because they can play the bowls whether it's raining, pouring, hot sun. It's got a great cover, and the air flows right through it beautifully. So they're very thankful to council for the new roofing, and the government helping as well. And I think I'll leave it at that, because there's so many others, but it's getting too late, and I'm ready for my bed as well. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. I will go to Councillor Tammy Radford. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also understand that it's very late, and I thank everybody who's still watching, that you're still there. So hopefully we're not talking to ourselves. I think that it's very important for me to quickly talk about the Cardinia COVID-19 Community Recovery Committee in this public forum. This is an interface between community and the council, working to understand the needs of the community and set up community-led recovery and resilience planning activities. We've had 3 meetings so far, with one more tomorrow. We've been working on the impacts that COVID has had on our community with regards to social, people, economic. Tomorrow we're really going to get into the nitty-gritty a bit more and form some working groups and an action plan. So I'll keep everybody informed at the next meeting. How the committee is going with their action plan and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Radford, on that report. Moving on to Councillor Jack Kowarczyk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have 2 things I'd like to mention. The first one is Councillor Graham Moore, a friend of mine, and myself. We went out to attend the Cardinia Lakes Residents Group AGM. Very good AGM, with the committee resolving to continue, obviously being pretty disappointed by COVID not being able to have any events like many other residents groups throughout our Shire. There was also a determination, not rock solid, but hopefully the creation, an amalgamation between 2 residents groups, potentially to form a Pakenham Hills residents group to represent the whole of the ward, which I think is a good thing, and there's a good future in that. I'd like to thank the outgoing president, Dave Roberts, and the incoming president, Tash Henderson, for all their work, and they work together quite well, and the rest of the committee. One other thing I just wanted to quickly mention, and I haven't done this before, so I don't know if it's the right forum, but we got some sad news in the week from the Pakenham family that Audrey Tyrrell had passed away. So I just wanted to pass on my condolences. And again, I know Graham Moore, who I'm very fond of, also knew Audrey Tyrrell very well, so I won't speak on his behalf, but I just wanted to say she was a stalwart of the Pakenham Football and Netball Club, as is the Tyrrell family, well loved in the community. So I just wanted to pass on my condolences to the Tyrrell family. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kowarczyk. again, I also pass on my condolences as well. Thank you for your report. Any other councillors wishing to provide a report? There being none, I will go to presentations of petitions, please. Any councillors wishing to table a petition? I note Councillor Jeff Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I have a petition that requests council provide a permanent location in Cockatoo for the community, the Cockatoo Country Market, which I've emailed to Doug Evans earlier today.
So thank you, Councillor Springfield. We note that you're tabling that, and a report will come to the March council meeting to determine on that. Moving on to community question time. I believe we have received a question from Mr. Andrew Little. I will ask the Chief Executive Officer to read and answer Mr. Little's question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Little, for your question. The question is, Council has prepared a detailed submission to DELWP's consultation on green wedge and agricultural land. What is Council doing about its agricultural areas in its current planning scheme that are not meeting the planning practices outlined in Planning Practice Note 3, issued in May 2017 by DELWP? Thanks again for your question, Mr. Little. Yes, Council has prepared a detailed submission for DELWP's consultation on green wedge and agricultural land, which was considered earlier in tonight's agenda in the meeting. In summary, agricultural land is appropriately zoned in the Cardinia planning scheme. These zones meet the requirements of the Cardinia Western Port Green Wedge Management Plan from May 2017 and the local planning policy 22.05 Western Port Green Wedge Policy, satisfying all the requirements of Planning Practice Note number 3, applying special use zones. And I can't comment any further, Mr. Mayor, not understanding further detail or context of Mr. Little's question. So thank you, Mr. Little, for your question.
I don't know what's happening there. Wait on there with me. Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Jeffs, for responding. Obviously, a written response will be provided to Mr. Little, so we acknowledge that. Moving on to councillor question time. Councillor Ross, I understand you have a councillor question for the Chief Executive Officer. I will ask Councillor Ross to read out his question and then the CEO to respond. Thank you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and get through this uninterrupted. Thank you. If a councillor drives to an event or meeting and travels the shortest distance on paper, this calculation would not take into account or consider any traffic, roadworks, breakdowns or delays on travelling, and only considers one person is using the road at the time. If the delays took the councillor longer than the calculation and the councillor misses the meeting but still arrives at the destination late or after the event, would the travel expense claim still be paid in a councillor's expense claim, or would it not be paid? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I'll refer that question to Ms. Jeffs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's getting late. I'm just trying to find my notes. And thank you, Councillor Ross. So through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillor expense policy states that travel must be undertaken as quickly as possible and by the shortest route possible. Travel expenses are paid for councillors attending council business. And so at this point, if a councillor does not attend a meeting or function, then a travel claim would not be reimbursed. I do point out, however, Mr. Mayor, that we are due to review the councillor expenses policy, so this may be something that could be taken up during that review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I can't see you either, Councillor Ross. I wish I could. I
can see anyway.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ross, for your question. And thank you, CEO, for the response. So, councillors, that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for your interest for people listening in at this late at night. Thank you. I now declare the meeting closed. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.